Chapter 11-12. As a spirit sword wielder, Gu Xianyuan's biggest shortcoming was that she couldn't enter the void. This was also why no matter how powerful Gu Xianyuan was, she would still be suppressed by U-level Yuan Ko or immortal sword wielder. There were two ways to solve this shortcoming. 1. Gu Xianyuan could become an immortal sword wielder. This way, she would naturally have the power to enter the void, and those U-level Yuan Ko would completely lose their support. 2. Gu Xianyuan also had the power to enter the void through other means. All in all, Gu Xianyuan had to find a way to enter the void. This was the fundamental solution to all problems. And now, the solution to the problem had arrived. A second ago, Sword Immortal Ling Su was still worrying about how Gu Xianyuan would deal with Arcarans, who was hiding in the void. In the next second, Gu Xianyuan appeared on Sword Immortal Ling Su's body and quickly said to Sword Immortal Ling Su, "Senior Ling Su, I hope you can help me. As long as I can help you, just say it." Sword Immortal Ling Su answered very quickly, without any hesitation. "It's very simple. I just need you to help me enter the void." This was Gu Xianyuan's solution. Since Gu Xianyuan couldn't enter the void, then she just had to find someone who could take her into the void. At this time, there was only one immortal sword wielder in Yuzhong City. Gu Xianyuan couldn't find anyone else to help her other than Sword Immortal Ling Su. Of course, that's not a problem. Sword Immortal Ling Su nodded at first, but soon revealed a troubled expression. The void has its own rules. Once I bring a power that isn't recognized by the void into the void, then I will naturally be rejected by the void. My movement speed in the void will definitely be greatly reduced. In this way, it will be very difficult to catch up to Arcarans in the void. At that time, I'm afraid it will be a waste of effort. Sword Immortal Ling Su's worry was not unreasonable. The reason why U-level Yuan Ko and Immortal Sword Wielder could freely travel through the void was that their power was recognized by the void. However, once they entered the void with a life form that had not been acknowledged by the void, they would be rejected by the void. The sword wielder would have to divert a large amount of energy to resist the rejection of the void. This was also why it was so troublesome to save someone through the void hand. This was not a big deal when they were not in combat mode. Immortal sword wielders could use all their strength to resist the rejection of the void. However, once they were in combat mode, they would have to use more strength to fight. As a result, dealing with the rejection of the void became a very difficult task. It was even possible that the opponent hiding in the void would take the opportunity to attack him. At that time, he would have to deal with the two forces of Yuan Ko and the rejection of the void at the same time, which would undoubtedly put his life in great danger. Don't worry. As long as I can enter the void, Arcarans is dead for sure. Gu Xianyuan took a deep look at the 32 fireballs that were constantly rolling in the sky and said with absolute certainty, "In that case, let's go." Sword Immortal Ling Su also tore open the void. Gu Xianyuan smiled slightly, and the two of them walked into the void together. At this moment, the sword wielders inside the safety wall and the audience watching the live broadcast were all extremely nervous as they stared at the place where Gu Xianyuan and Sword Immortal Ling Su disappeared. According to the host's explanation, they already knew that Gu Xianyuan and Sword Immortal Ling Su had already entered the void to pursue Arcarans. This concerned their own lives. If Gu Xianyuan won, then the army of Yuan Ko, who had lost a universe-level Yuan Ko, would definitely fall into chaos, and the hope of holding on would greatly increase. However, if Gu Xianyuan lost, then humanity would completely lose the power to resist the universe-level Yuan Ko, and the entire defense line would collapse in an instant. Although everyone was eager to know the situation of the battle in the void, they had no way of knowing exactly what was going on in the void. However, the cameraman had the foresight to point the camera at the rolling fireballs in the sky. Many of the audience immediately understood the cameraman's intention. If Gu Xianyuan won in the void, then these fireballs would definitely dissipate. However, if Gu Xianyuan lost in the void, only less than a minute had passed, but in the hearts of everyone in the audience, it felt as long as a year. As they waited anxiously, the fireballs finally changed. The fireballs that were rolling like wheels a moment ago stood still in an instant. Then, they began to bounce up and down like bouncing balls. Finally, these fireballs leaped to an extremely high altitude and exploded like brilliant fireworks. After the final brilliance, they disappeared without a trace. Did we win? Everyone who saw this scene nervously asked the people around them, but no one could give an accurate answer. Although according to speculation, the destruction of these fireballs also meant that Arcarans had lost, this was only speculation. No one could be sure of the situation in the void. Just as everyone was speculating, there was finally movement in the void. A void door was sliced open, and Gu Xianyuan walked out from the void door like a fairy. Her posture was perfect like a goddess. Behind Gu Xianyuan was Sword Immortal Ling Su, whose face was completely blank. Rather than saying that Sword Immortal Ling Su was an immortal sword wielder at this time, he was more like a child with dementia. Miss Gu Xianyuan, did we win? One of the sword wielder with the loudest voice asked Gu Xianyuan impatiently. Gu Xianyuan didn't answer his question. Instead, she looked at the Yuan Ko on the city wall, who were in different states of mind. Among them, the ugliest, the cruelest, and the craziest Yuan Ko from the Western Beast Camp began to panic. Except for a small portion of Yuan Ko who were still fighting with the sword ladies, the rest of the Yuan Ko from the Western Beast Camp seemed to have lost their leader. They began to scatter everywhere, and some even began to attack the other Yuan Ko around them. And the majority of the Yuan Ko from the Western Beast Camp began to retreat out of Yuzhong City. They fled with all their might in the direction they had come from, as if there was an extremely terrifying enemy here. Arcarans is dead? All the sword wielder and the spectators looked at each other, unable to believe their eyes. There was only one explanation for the Yuan bandit army of the Western Magical Beast Camp to be in such a state. Their leader had died. After losing their leader, the Yuan Ko returned to their individual existence. The instincts that had been suppressed by their leader began to erupt. They began to attack the Yuan Ko from the opposing camp and began to kill each other. And most of the Yuan Ko from the Western Beast Camp felt the fear that erupted when their leader died. It was because of this fear that they chose to escape from the battlefield in Yuzhong City. From this point, it could be seen that Arcarans was indeed dead. He was indeed dead. Long live! After confirming this, all the sword wielder burst into wild cheers. Gu Xuanyuan's battle was equivalent to destroying 1/3 of Yuan Ko's power. Arcarans is dead? Alexander the Great, who had the absolute advantage in the battle against the Wangshu sword, immediately discovered the fact that Arcarans was dead before the Yuan Ko from the Western Beast Camp could retreat. At the same time, he felt that the void around Yuzhong City was suddenly in an extremely chaotic state, as if a huge hand was stirring up the entire void. As a cautious person, he immediately felt extreme fear. If Arcarans, who was also a universe-level bandit, could be killed in the void, then wouldn't he suffer the same fate? Thinking of this, Alexander could no longer stay calm and fight against the Wangshu sword on the city wall. He immediately used an ultimate move to force the Wangshu sword to retreat. Then, he gave up the absolute advantage that he had painstakingly built up. He didn't even dare to enter the void. He directly jumped off the city wall and returned to his army. Only then did he barely feel a trace of security. At this time, the feathered serpent god also appeared beside Alexander. This universe-level Yuan Ko naturally also sensed Arcarans' death. This also deeply shocked her. She put away the wine flask that never left her hand, and hurriedly asked Alessandro what happened to Arcarans. However, Alexander couldn't say why. He could only tell the feathered serpent god that he was fighting with the immortal sword-level sword mistress Wangshu sword. Arcarans went to chase after the Wangshu sword wielder, but he was later blocked by a human spirit sword wielder. A huge battle broke out between the two sides. In the end, Arcarans suffered a great loss in the hands of the spirit sword mistress, so the two sides moved the battlefield to the void. Alexander didn't know the rest. He only knew that Arcarans died in the void. "I'll enter the void to take a look." The feathered serpent god immediately entered the void, trying to find some clues. However, she quickly retreated from the void with a head full of fog. "The void is very chaotic now," the feathered serpent god said worriedly. "The void is chaotic like a whirlpool. I'm afraid we won't be able to find any other clues." "But this chaos is the biggest clue," Alessandra immediately said. "The void is empty and stable. Even we can't form a vortex in the void. The only way is to understand the laws of the void and then destroy the laws of the void. That way there's a possibility of causing chaos in the void. It's very likely that an existence that can destroy the void did it and caused Arcarans to die in the void." "An existence that can destroy the void?" The feathered serpent god was shocked. The pair of huge opes on her chest began to shake up and down like a basketball. "Don't scare me. I've never heard of a third human Giendi." Chapter 11:13. Even a universe-level Yuan Ko like feathered serpent god could not disturb the rules of the void. This required an extremely strong understanding of the rules of the void. At the same time, one had to be able to control an extremely strong power to do so. In theory, as long as these two conditions were met, even an ancient sword wielder could disturb the rules of the void. However, since ancient times, only primordial level Yuan Ko and Emperor sword wielder could satisfy the criteria of disturbing the rules of the void. Apart from them, no other level could do this. Therefore, the feathered serpent god immediately began to suspect that a human emperor sword wielder had killed Archimonde in the void. That's strange. According to the information from above, wasn't there a flood-level dragon fighting Yuzhang City? This time, the Yuan shield was also destroyed by this flood-level dragon. Where is she now? Why is there no trace of her? Feathered serpent god suddenly thought of this. Could it be that an emperor sword wielder? Very likely. Alessandra nodded solemnly. At the same time, he shrank his body back. One could imagine the fear in his heart. Although Alessandra had seen Archimonde and that spirit sword-level swordsman enter the void, Alessandra didn't believe that it was that spirit sword-level swordsman who killed Archimonde in the void. He was more willing to believe that there was a human sword emperor hiding near Yuzhang City, ready to kill them at any time. Let's be careful. Don't fail to conquer Yuzhang City and end up dying here. That idiot Loki is the best lesson, feathered serpent god immediately said to Alessandra. Quetzalcoatl immediately said to Alessandra. The Western Pantheon and the Martyr's Palace had always had a good relationship. However, the Western Pantheon and the Western magical beasts were complete enemies. If it weren't for the sake of conquering Yuzhang City, these two forces wouldn't have worked together. That's right. Be careful. Alessandra agreed. With this guess, Alessandra and Feathered Serpent God became extremely careful. They did not dare to charge forward anymore. They could only order their subordinates to keep going forward. They wanted to force out the mysterious person who had killed Arcarans. Yuan Kos were most afraid of Emperor Sword Wielder, but they were even more afraid of the Emperor Sword Wielder hiding in the dark. It seems like those universe-class Yuan Ko won't make a move for a while. Seeing Alexander and Feathered Serpent God, the two top Yuan Ko experts retreat, Gu Xuanyuan's face finally revealed a hint of a smile. Yeah. Until now, I still don't believe that a spirit sword-level sword wielder could actually stir the rules of the entire void and directly use the power of the void to kill Archimonde in the void. Sword Immortal Ling Su spoke with a fearful expression. Even now, he was still recalling the battle that he had just experienced. At that time, after he and Gu Xianyuan entered the void, The two of them saw Arcarans constantly releasing fireballs into the outside world. "I'll take you to kill him right now." Just as Sword Immortal Ling Su was about to bring Gu Xianyuan closer to Arcarans, Gu Xianyuan suddenly pressed down on Sword Immortal Ling Su's shoulder and said, "Lord Ling Su, I have another favor that I hope you can help me with." "Say it. Since I've already brought you into the void, there's nothing I can't help you with." Sword Immortal Ling Su nodded. "I need to guide a supreme sword technique. This will take 3 minutes. I hope that Sword Immortal Ling Su can think of a way to delay Arcarans for 3 minutes so that I have time to release my sword technique," Gu Xianyuan said faintly. Hearing Gu Xuanyuan's words, Sword Immortal Ling Su's mentality collapsed. "Miss Xianyuan, please don't joke around. Arcarans is a veteran universe-class Yuan Ko. Unless His Majesty Jiandi uses a powerful move, it's impossible to directly kill Arcarans," Sword Immortal Ling Su said with a bitter expression. Sword Immortal Ling Su spoke with a wry expression. He felt like Gu Xianyuan had gone mad. Otherwise, she wouldn't say something like this to kill Arcarans. "Trust me. I never lie." Gu Xianyuan didn't directly answer Sword Immortal Ling Su's question. Instead, her gaze was resolute as she continued to speak to Sword Immortal Ling Su. "All right. Even if the power of your powerful move can kill Arcarans, this is the void. As soon as he notices anything amiss, he'll immediately escape from the void. No matter how powerful your powerful move is, it's useless if it can't hit Arcarans." Sword Immortal Ling Su continued to persuade her patiently. "Trust me." Gu Xianyuan still said these 3 words. "All right. I'll only help you delay for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I'll immediately take you away from the void." Sword Immortal Ling Su finally agreed to Gu Xuanyuan's request helplessly. Then, he charged toward Arcarans on the other side of the void. Arcarans was instantly given a fright when he saw a sword wielder flying toward him. He thought that it was that woman with terrifying close combat abilities who had come to make trouble for him. Arcarans was just about to escape from the void when he realized that it wasn't that woman who was charging toward him. It was the male immortal sword rank sword wielder who had been beaten to a pulp by him earlier. He was like a punching bag. Damn it! Faced with such a punching bag opponent, if Arcarans tried to escape, he wouldn't have the face to continue living in this world. Thus, Arcarans unceremoniously charged forward and directly tapped a finger of death on Sword Immortal Ling Su's body. Sword Immortal Ling Su knew that he was no match for Arcarans no matter what. Thus, he simply adopted the mentality of not retaliating when hit, not retaliating when scolded, and focused on defending himself. He relied on the sufficient energy of his close combat shield to forcefully withstand Arcarans' attacks. Fortunately, Arcarans' most powerful move, the Finger of Death, had a 2-minute cooldown. Otherwise, Sword Immortal Ling Su would really be unable to withstand 10% of the close combat shield's energy. Arcarans attacked Sword Immortal Ling Su like a madman while cautiously and vigilantly observing his surroundings. Even an idiot could tell that there was something very wrong with Sword Immortal Ling Su, who had rushed over to act as a punching bag. There must be some kind of trap waiting for him in the surroundings. But after observing for a long time, Arcarans still didn't discover any signs of that terrifying female swordsman appearing next to him. 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Sword Immortal Ling Su anxiously sensed that the energy of his close combat shield was continuously decreasing. At the same time, he secretly calculated the time in his mind. He planned to leave immediately after the 3 minutes were up. He definitely wouldn't become a living target for Arcarans. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. On the other side, Arcarans became more and more flustered. Arcarans was also an outstanding schemer in his own world. He had destroyed more than half of the world of Azeroth. And at this moment, he suddenly recalled the scene when young Arthas raised Frostmourne. Go. Go now. Arcarans abruptly gave up on attacking Sword Immortal Ling Su, and immediately prepared to tear open the void and escape to the real world. Logically speaking, Archaron's only needed to use his mind to immediately open a hole in the void and allow Archaron's to escape. But at this moment, no matter what order Archaron's gave, the void still didn't give Archaron's any response. Senior Ling Su, hurry and leave. It was also at this moment that Gu Xuanyuan's voice suddenly sounded in Sword Immortal Ling Su's ears. Sword Immortal Ling Su made a prompt decision and immediately left Archaron's attack range. Don't go. Seeing that Sword Immortal Ling Su was about to leave, Archaron's knew that something was wrong. He immediately chased after him in an attempt to keep Sword Immortal Ling Su by his side. But at this moment, Archaron's suddenly discovered that the void that he could originally move freely in suddenly became incomparably scorched. It was as if his legs were stuck in cement, and he could no longer move even a millimeter. Laws. The laws of the void have changed. It was only at this moment that Archaron's suddenly realized that the laws of the void had changed. Or rather, the laws of the void had become chaotic. Could it be that there was an Emperor sword-level sword wielder hiding in the void to ambush him? Sword Immortal Ling Su only felt a flash before his eyes, and he suddenly appeared behind Gu Xuanyuan. At this moment, Gu Xuanyuan was looking at him calmly. She didn't look any different from usual, but the long sword in her hand was now vibrating at an incomprehensible frequency. And as the long sword vibrated, a small vortex was gradually forming around the longsword. Sword Immortal Ling Su could sense that the vortex represented chaos. This vortex was destroying the laws of the entire void. Go! Gu Xuanyuan's cherry lips spoke slightly, and the vortex on the execution immortal sword slowly flew away from the execution immortal sword. It flew toward Archaron's, who was imprisoned in the void. And on the other side, Archaron's also saw this vortex flying toward him. His pupils instantly dilated to the extreme. He could already sense the extreme chaos of the laws contained within the vortex. Run! Run! A tentacle on Archaron's brain directly detached from Archaron's head, and instantly turned into a small black ball that looked like a walnut. This small ball was Archaron's demon core, and also the source of Archaron's power. Generally speaking, the demon core was the safest when it stayed within one's body. Once it left one's body, even an ancient sword wielder could destroy one's demon core. But Archaron's couldn't care less. Right now, all he could do was let the demon core leave his body, and then explode with all the power contained within the demon core to forcefully create a small hole in the sealed void. This way, his demon core could escape from the void. Only then would he have a last chance of survival. Archaron's decision could not be said to be indecisive. If he had made this decision a second earlier, perhaps he could really escape from the void. However, he was still a second too late, and his death was destined. The laws of the void had already been completely changed. Even if the demon core exploded with all its power, it would not be able to break through the restraints of the void. In the end, the small vortex that represented the destruction of the laws collided with Archaron's body. Then, like an atomic bomb exploding, a huge mushroom cloud formed by the vortex rose up in the void. Completely destroyed everything around the mushroom cloud, and even that part of the void itself was destroyed. Xuanyuan, Your Majesty? Sword Immortal Ling Su, who had witnessed Archaron's destruction, said in a daze. The woman beside him was definitely not a spirit sword wielder, but a true emperor sword wielder. Chapter 11:14. Of course I'm not an emperor sword-level sword wielder. Otherwise, why would I need you to bring me into the void? After leaving the void, Gu Xuanyuan, who was standing on the city wall, explained calmly to Sword Immortal Ling Su, I'm just borrowing the rules of the void. But if you want to destroy the rules of the void, you must have the ability of an emperor sword-level sword wielder. This can't be wrong. Sword Immortal Ling Su said with some disbelief. That's where you're wrong. To enter the void, you must obtain the approval of the void. This is the prerequisite of becoming an immortal sword-level sword wielder. But destroying the void doesn't require such a prerequisite. You just need to have enough destructive power and be able to see through the essence of the void. Seeing that sword immortal Ling Su still didn't understand, Gu Xianyuan simply continued to explain. It's like if you want to enter a house, you must obtain the owner's permission and let the owner open the door for you before you can enter. This house is the void, and the owner of the void is the rules of the void. But once you enter this house, without the protection of the door, you can do whatever you want to this house, as long as you have the ability to defeat the owner who is in the way. Gu Xianyuan gave a vivid metaphor. But the owner of this house is an emperor sword-level sword wielder. You must have the power of an emperor sword-level sword wielder to be able to kill this owner. Sword immortal Ling Su still didn't understand. If the power of an emperor sword-level sword wielder is equivalent to the power of an adult, and my power is that of a child, of course I can't defeat this adult with normal methods. But if I have a treasured sword that can cut through iron like mud, and that adult is unarmed, then wouldn't the result be different? Wouldn't a child be able to kill this adult with one strike? Gu Xianyuan continued. If that's the case. Sword immortal Ling Su seemed to have understood something, but he didn't completely understand. Then what is this sword that can destroy the void? Isn't the sword right here? Gu Xianyuan raised the slaying immortal sword in her hand and gestured in front of sword immortal Ling Su. After that, the battle on the city wall fell into a complete stalemate. After learning that a U-rank, Yuan Ko, had been killed by sword immortal Ling Su and Gu Xianyuan, the morale of the humans was extremely high. That flood rank Yuan Ko had already surrendered, and this U-rank Yuan Ko had truly died at the hands of the humans. What else did the humans have to fear? Kill these sons of B** cheese, Yuan Ko. The morale of the humans was extremely high, and the Yuan Ko on the city wall were forced to retreat again and again. The top-tier U-rank Yuan Ko didn't dare to fight in order to preserve his own life, but Gu Xianyuan and sword immortal Ling Su didn't let go of this opportunity. They appeared on the battlefield in a manner that completely crushed all the low-level Yuan Ko. Wherever Gu Xianyuan and sword immortal Ling Su passed by, none of the Yuan Ko could survive for more than a minute. In this way, the casualties of the sword-bearers and sword maidens quickly decreased from dozens of people and hundreds of swords per minute to only a few people and a dozen swords per minute. As this went on, the humans entered a state of complete superiority. Gradually, the Yuan Ko that had climbed up the city wall were forced to a corner that was extremely close to the edge of the city wall. Some of the more courageous sword-bearers even ran out from the safety wall to fight alongside their sword maidens. This kind of situation naturally made Gu Xianyuan and sword immortal Ling Su very satisfied. However, Alexander and Quetzalcoatl, who were huddled within the Yuan Ko army, began to feel uneasy again. Although these low-level Yuan Ko weren't worth a lot of money, they were still an important force for their own forces. If they lost too many of them here, not only would they not be able to answer to their superiors when they returned, even they themselves would feel extremely pained. Among them, the one who felt the most pained was probably Alexander. This time, the main force attacking Yuzhang City came from his Macedonian army. They were Alexander's direct subordinates. Alexander's heart was bleeding as he watched the subordinates that he had painstakingly cultivated fall on the city wall like grass being mowed down. "We can't go on like this, it's just a waste of our own strength." Alexander couldn't bear such losses anymore, and said to Quetzalcoatl beside him, "Then what do you plan to do? Are we going to take the risk and kill our way up there?" Quetzalcoatl pouted and waved his huge weapon. "If you want to go, go by yourself. I don't want to die there. What I mean is, can we order the army to retreat first? Don't engage in such pointless consumption." Alexander said, "I don't care, but if anything happens, you'll be responsible for it." "I won't care." Compared to Alexander, who felt extremely pained, Quetzalcoatl didn't care much about these Yuan-ko who had died in battle. Most of these Yuan-ko were Yuan-ko from the Greek and Norse divine systems. She didn't have many Yuan-ko from the Mayan divine systems, so she didn't feel bad about their death. She was just being generous at the expense of others. I just feel that this is too depressing, Alexander said resentfully. Let's not talk about the Western magical beast army. The Archaerons are all dead, so it's natural for them to escape. But what's going on with the Fuso divine system and the Heavenly Court? We agreed to attack Yuzhong City together, but now we haven't even seen their shadows. We can't fight this battle. What you said makes sense. Quetzalcoatl nodded. Okay. Let's order the army to retreat and wait for those guys who came late. Who said that we should withdraw the army? We, the Fuso divine system, won't agree to it. As soon as Feathered Serpent God finished speaking, he heard a haughty voice. Shortly after, a slender blonde girl in scarlet tight-fitting clothes came to Alexander and Feathered Serpent God's side. Ahaha! My lovely Ashamasa-chan, you're finally here. Upon seeing the young lady, the Quetzalcoatlus immediately shook its huge opi and pulled the young lady into its embrace. After rubbing against the world-class opi for a minute or two, it finally released the young lady who was about to suffocate. **starred woman, coquettish fox. The girl took a few deep breaths of fresh air and stared at Quetzalcoatl's unscientific opi. She pouted and spoke in dissatisfaction. Miss Asuka, you're finally here. I thought you wouldn't show up. Seeing the blonde girl appear, Alexander finally heaved a long sigh of relief. The Fuso divine system had finally arrived. I ran into a little trouble on the way. Asuka fanned herself. But I've already thrown that trouble to Ling Boli. I've brought all the elite troops of the Fuso divine system here. As soon as Asuka finished speaking, countless monsters appeared outside Yuzhong City. Most of these monsters were lantern-like ghosts, red-tongued ghosts, broom-like gods, lamp-carrying monks carrying small lanterns, and umbrella-like demons. These were the common rat-level and tiger-level Yuan-ko in Fuso mythology. Of course, there were also the rarer ghost-level and soul-level Yuan-ko, such as virgin girls, mercenaries, and butterfly spirits. There were also the more powerful white wolf, demonic fox, and two-mouthed woman, such as flood serpent and dragon-level Yuan-ko. These Yuan-ko formed the main force of the Fuso divine system. One had to admit that this time, the Fuso divine system had sent out most of its main force. Except for Yuan-ko, who was holed up on Fuso Island, almost two-thirds of the Fuso divine system's power on the continent had gathered here. They had brought out all their savings. Seeing so many Yuan-ko troops, Alexander's expression became much better. He also suppressed his dissatisfaction with the Fuso divine system. Since the people have already arrived, then hurry up and join the battle. Yuzhong City's city walls will soon be breached by us. If you don't contribute enough, don't blame us for not giving you a share of the spoils of war. Alexander immediately urged the Fuso divine branch to send their troops into the battle. Wait! Although Asuka was arrogant, she was not stupid. She had already noticed that something was wrong with the current situation. So she immediately said, "Didn't you just shout about retreating? I don't think it's because the walls of Yuzhong City are about to be breached, but because your troops are about to be driven out by the people of Yuzhong City. Come back." "Nonsense, can't you see that our troops have the upper hand?" Alexander said. "No, the situation is not right," Asuka muttered. "Where is Archimonde? Where are the troops of the Western magical beast? Didn't they say that they had arrived long ago? By the way, I saw many defeated troops of the Western magical beasts along the way. Alexander, you are also a person of status. Can you tell me the truth? Ayaya, now that we have to cooperate sincerely, it's best to tell everything. There's no need to hide anything. Don't you think so, my King Alexander?" The feathered serpent goddess smiled charmingly, then told Asuka everything that had just happened. What? Archimonde died in the void after entering it. Asuka was also shocked by the news. Her expression made Alexander secretly happy. You arrogant woman, you finally have your moment of surprise. But to Alexander's surprise, Asuka immediately calmed down after the initial shock. She even had a playful expression on her face, as if something very interesting had happened. Then let me play with these humans first. Asuka waved to the sky, and a huge capsule broke through the void and appeared, wrapping Asuka's whole body. At the same time, the ground began to tremble violently, and the ground split open. A huge red robot emerged from the ground, and the capsule carrying Asuka instantly flew into the robot's body. The robot's eyes, which had been dead silent, suddenly shone with a scarlet light. Chapter 11:15. What's that? When the sword-bearers, as well as the ordinary humans, saw the robot that was even taller than Yuzhong City's city wall appear outside Yuzhong City through the windows of the safety wall, they all showed a terrified expression. This robot had a strong body and a body that was as sharp as a blade. It looked like a terrifying god. It's New Age Gospel Warrior too. Seeing the crimson robot appear, Sword Immortal Ling Su and Gu Xianyuan both showed cautious and nervous expressions. They were not unfamiliar with this robot, because it was one of the trump cards of the Fusang Celestial System. It was the strongest robot, New Age Gospel Warrior 2. Looks like the Fusang Celestial System's troops have arrived, Gu Xianyuan said with a frown. Actually, Yuzhong City had already been informed by Yuyang Fortress that the Fusang Celestial System's troops were included in this attack on Yuan-Ko. Furthermore, the Fusang Celestial System was the first troop to appear in Yuyang Fortress's sight. However, they did not expect the Fusang Celestial System to arrive later than the other celestial systems. They did not know if there were any other changes. How is it? Are you confident that you can deal with him? Sword Immortal Ling Su turned around and asked Gu Xianyuan very cautiously. The New Age Gospel Warriors did not appear many times in the battles between humans and Yuan-Ko. The last battle was when Gu Jinjiendi led the attack on Fusang Island. Back then, under the leadership of Sword Monarch Yen Jin, the humans were singing a triumphant song. Soon, they occupied half of Fusang Island and wiped out all the Yuan bandit. During this time, a few very famous battles took place. One of them was the Battle of the Retreat of New Tokyo City. 3 New Age Gospel Warriors joined forces to fight against the human sword-bearers. They forcefully stopped the human sword-bearers for a full 3 hours and almost killed a Sword Immortal-level sword-bearer. After all the Yuan-Ko in New Tokyo City had retreated to a safe area, these 3 New Age Gospel Warriors also retreated to a safe area. From then on, the New Age Gospel Warriors became famous among Yuan-Ko and the humans. They became one of the most famous, powerful, and difficult to deal with U-level Yuan-Ko of the Fusang Celestial System. I remember that the Gospel Warriors of the new era don't have the ability to enter the void, right? Gu Xianyuan asked calmly. That's not bad. Because the Gospel Warriors of the new era are human mechanical creations, they can't be recognized by the void and can't enter the void. Regardless of whether it's the weakest machine 2 or the most powerful machine 1, they're all the same. Neither of them can enter the void. Sword Immortal Ling Su explained. Then that's easy. An opponent that can't enter the void, and such a huge opponent, I like it the most. Gu Xianyuan revealed a smile. This Yuzhong City is nothing special. Without the protection of that turtle shell, I can cross the city wall with one leg. Asuka, who was piloting plane number 2, said with satisfaction. She was about to step out with her slender red thighs, cross the city walls of Yuzhong City, and directly enter the ordinary district of Yuzhong City to wreak havoc when a tiny mosquito suddenly appeared on the radar of plane number 2. There's actually someone who dares to overestimate themselves and stop me? Asuka, who was in the cockpit, sneered. 12 windows opened on the arm of plane number 2, revealing 12 missile launchers loaded with missiles. With a single thought from Asuka, these missiles were fired one after another, all aimed at the fly that was flying toward plane number 2. This fly was naturally Gu Xianyuan, who had overestimated herself. The missiles launched by plane number 2 were all equipped with the most advanced guidance system. This guidance system wasn't the traditional thermal guidance system, but the most advanced telepathic guidance system. It could aim and guide the target according to the pilot's telepathic thought. As long as the opponent was within the pilot's line of sight, then they could accurately hit the target they wanted to aim at. At the same time, these missiles also had a super speed of 10 times the speed of sound. This was a speed that even immortal sword maidens might not have. La 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 la. Asuka hummed a little tune, happily waiting for the moment when her missiles hit the target. Just now, she had already used her radar to scan the body data of the fly and found that this fly was actually a small spirit sword-level sword wielder. With this discovery, Asuka had no fear to speak of. A spirit sword-level sword wielder was a level lower than her new era Evangelion. In Asuka's imagination, the opponent couldn't dodge her missiles at all and would be hit by her missiles very easily. At least 40% of her energy would be consumed. Left, missing, right side of the protective shield energy. But soon, Asuka could not hum the little tune anymore. Asuka was a little frightened to find that the missiles that were supposed to be controlled by her telepathic thoughts suddenly began to waver, as if there was a huge force fighting with her for the control of the missiles. Asuka immediately strengthened her telepathic thoughts, wanting to regain control of the missiles, but found that it was of no use at all. In the end, the missiles still lost her control, changed direction in the air, and finally bombarded plane number 2. This is impossible. No one can take away the control of my missiles. Although these missiles did not cause any serious damage, it gave Asuka a big blow. Because this was something that had never happened in previous battles. The missiles that she controlled either hit the target and exploded, or were directly defeated by the target's attack in the air. But now, turning around and being controlled by the enemy and finally falling on her and exploding was something that had never happened before. While Asuka was still wondering what happened just now, Gu Xianyuan had gradually approached the body of Asuka number 2. In fact, it was a very simple thing to seize the control of the missiles just now. Gu Xianyuan did not fight for the control of the missiles from the beginning to the end. In fact, the control was still in the hands of Asuka. But she controlled the airflow around the missiles. Comrades who had learned flight mechanics knew that the reason why planes and missiles could fly in the air was that they relied on the reaction force caused by fluid mechanics to objects. If someone could control all the airflow around the missile, it would be equivalent to a pair of invisible giant hands grabbing the missile and easily sending it back to where it came from. This was not the easiest way for Gu Xianyuan. The easiest way was to blast out a few sword chi and directly give these missiles a chance in midair. But Gu Xianyuan had the intention to teach this arrogant Miss Asuka an interesting lesson, and through this reversal of the plot, she gave Asuka a very shocking blow. I don't believe that you still have the ability to seize control of so many of my missiles. Asuka gritted her teeth and said. This time, not only did the missile launchers on her arms open, but even the missile launchers on her thighs and chest opened at the same time. A total of 108 missile launchers, more than 2,400 missiles were fired at the same time, and under the control of Asuka's mind, they shot towards the fly flying in the air. Idiot! A disdainful sneer appeared on Gu Xianyuan's face. It seemed that it was just as the intelligence said, the pilot of number 2 was always a proud idiot. If the pilots of number 1 and number 0 were not by her side, she could have done a lot of very stupid things. For example, right now, she actually fired all the missiles in her body in one breath. It was not to say that firing all these missiles would completely deplete the missiles in number 2. There were at least 100,000 missiles stored in number 2's body, and firing more than 2,000 missiles at once was not a big deal for number 2. What was really important was that controlling the flight trajectory of each missile required a certain amount of the pilot's mental power and mental strength. More than 2,000 missiles were fired at the same time, and the pilot's mental strength was completely exhausted. If these missiles did not cause fatal damage to his enemies, then the No. 2 helicopter would undoubtedly be wide open for Gu Xianyuan to deal with. 9 Swords of Mysterious Heaven, Abyssal Golden Chrysanthemum. Gu Xianyuan did not even bother to change her move. For the third time, she used the classic Abyssal Golden Chrysanthemum. A golden chrysanthemum bloomed in the air, and the fierce sword energy collided with the flying missiles. The entire sky was like a large string of firecrackers burning. Intense explosions sounded in the air one after another, like firecrackers burning during a wedding. In less than a minute, the more than 2,000 missiles all exploded in the sky, and the fog formed by the explosion shrouded the entire air. For a moment, whether it was the sword-bearer or Yuan Ko, their vision range was reduced to single digits. Activate the radar system at full power. Find the location of that fly for me. Asuka, who felt dizzy, issued an order to her No. 2 plane. At this time, the director's theory of smog anti-laser theory had fully proved its superiority. When the air was filled with gunpowder particles, even the most advanced radar system lost its function. Asuka used the last bit of her energy to activate the function of the radar to detect the location of that fly. Unfortunately, it was all too late. When Asuka finally found that damn fly, she was surprised to find that the fly was actually standing on the back of the neck of the No. 2 mech, which was where Asuka's cockpit was located. Is this stupid fly trying to break through the armor of No. 2 plane? The dizzy Asuka said disdainfully. Doesn't he know that even the attack of an immortal sword-level sword mistress can't break through the defensive armor of my pilot cabin? Unless it's that Emperor sword-level sword mistress of theirs. Warning! Warning! The outer armor of the pilot cabin has been destroyed. The outer armor of the pilot cabin has been destroyed. Before Asuka could finish her sentence, a series of intense alarms sounded in the pilot cabin. Chapter 11:16. There were 3 main reasons why the 3 new era Evangelion robots could hold off the swordsman army and the 4-sword immortal level swordsman for 3 hours. First, the gospel of the new era's Eoli attacks were very powerful. When all the missiles were fired, the sword immortal level sword-bearers had to protect the weaker, low-level sword-bearers to prevent them from being fatally injured. This, on the other hand, alleviated the attacks of the sword immortal level sword-bearers, and bought more time for the new era's gospel of the new era. Another important reason was the powerful defense of the new era Evangelion, as well as the power hidden within the outer armor. The armor on the body was comparable to diamond in defense. Other than the attack of the sword immortal level swordsman, no one else could damage this armor. The strongest armor was located in the cockpit of the Evangelion, which was the area at the back of the cervical vertebrae. The armor here was made of the best materials. In terms of strength, it was comparable to the strongest dimensional alloy. This was the armor that only sword immortal level swordsmen could damage. At the same time, the most important thing was that the new era Evangelion was not a simple robot. There was a living body hidden within the armor. Therefore, no matter how much damage was done to the other parts of the armor, as long as the armor at the cervical vertebrae was not broken, the swordsman would not be able to harm the pilot in the cockpit. If the pilot in the cockpit could not be harmed, then the new era Evangelion was equivalent to an immortal body. No matter what, it was impossible to destroy his existence. When Asuka found out that Gu Xianyuan had begun to damage the armor at the vertebrae, she was naturally disdainful. She did not believe that a sword immortal level swordsman would have the ability to damage her armor that was comparable to Emperor alloy. But reality made Asuka despair. The opponent just had to destroy the armor that she was so proud of. In just 3 minutes, the outermost armor at the vertebrae had a hole big enough for the opponent to crawl in. It's okay. I still have Adam's body. This sword, immortal level swordsman, will not be able to break through Adam's body no matter what. Although Asuka could comfort herself like this, when she thought of her optimistic view of the hardness of the outermost armor, Asuka suddenly lost her confidence. This is a little troublesome. In fact, it was just as Asuka had imagined. Adam's body posed a considerable obstacle to Gu Xianyuan. The outermost armor was the best for Gu Xianyuan. This was because Gu Xianyuan was currently wielding the exterminating immortal sword, an existence that in essence surpassed an emperor's sword like the Xianyuan sword. It would not be difficult for such a sword to break through the protection of emperor alloy. Gu Xianyuan only needed to use a little force to stab the Zhu Xian sword into the armor, and easily opened a hole in the neck of Unit 2. What Gu Xianyuan found difficult to deal with was the mysterious body under the armor. Gu Xianyuan had long known that the gospel of the new era wasn't just a simple robot, and that there was a very mysterious body hidden under his tough armor. This body had a strong explosive power and terrifying recovery ability, which was the fundamental reason why the gospel warriors of the new era could fight for such a long time. Once the new era gospel warrior entered a berserk state, then the new era gospel warrior would, for a short period of time, burst out with a terrifying power equivalent to that of the universe stage Yuan Ko. This kind of body feels similar to Batet and the others. Every cell seems to be filled with divine power. Gu Xianyuan tested the conventional method, and found that he really didn't seem to have any way to deal with this body. The exterminating immortal sword was still sharp, and could easily stab into this body. But the problem was that once the exterminating immortal sword was stabbed, he felt a mysterious force sucking the exterminating immortal sword. The exterminating immortal sword seemed to be integrated with this body. If Gu Xianyuan didn't burst out a large amount of sword qi in an instant, perhaps he wouldn't even be able to pull out the exterminating immortal sword. Haha. This ant, sure enough, there's no change in Adam's body. It's impossible for him to threaten me. After discovering that this fly stayed on the periphery of Adam's body, Asuka suddenly became active again. I'll let you have a taste of the power of the parting yang dagger. Asuka controlled Mecha number 2 to pull out an incomparably sharp parting yang dagger from her calf. This dagger was made of the same material as the spine armor, which was the same grade of material as the Imperial alloy. At the same time, she used black technology to add a layer of flowing positive ions to the dagger. This kind of dagger could cause unparalleled damage to both the sword maiden and the sword wielder. Those flowing positive ions could even directly pass through the sword maiden's personal shield. Without breaking through the personal shield, they could cause fatal damage to the sword maiden's body. At this time, Asuka pulled out the parting yang dagger from Mecha number 2. Naturally, there was only one goal, and that was to kill the fly that was already hiding near her cockpit. What was even more amazing was that because of the restrictions of the rest of the armor, this fly could only stay near the broken entrance, and couldn't escape to any other place. This was as if it was fixed to her neck, and Asuka's parting yang dagger could stab into Gu Xuanyuan's body even with her eyes closed. It could be imagined that if such a dagger were to stab into Gu Xuanyuan's body without any personal shield protection, the consequences would be very terrifying. Looks like our Miss Asuka is ready to use the parting yang dagger. With Gohan's intelligence, of course, he could guess that when he was blocked in the cockpit, this arrogant pilot Miss Asuka would definitely not hesitate to use the parting yang dagger to deal with him. Since that's the case, I can only try this move. Gu Xuanyuan's mouth revealed a faint smile, and at the same time, the Zhu Xian sword in her hand was slightly pressed against Adam's flesh. Chaos Sword Art, Chaotic Golden Lotus. Gu Xuanyuan's cherry lips slightly spat out, and an inexplicable hidden force burst forth from the Zhu Xian sword, and instantly passed through Adam's entire body. Adam's body stirred in a strange way. Speaking of which, this chaotic golden lotus had an indissoluble bond with robots. The fourth move of the Chaos Sword art was also used to fight against robots. But at that time, Guhan was fighting against the Third German Reich of the Führer. As a similarly space-class robot, in terms of pure defense, the Third German Reich of the Third German Reich's defense was not inferior to the outer armor of the Gospel of the New Era. However, compared to Adam's physical body, it was still slightly lacking. At that time, Guhan only had a Qi sword in his hand, and its nature was far from comparable to the Zhu Xian sword that Guhan was holding now. More importantly, at that time Guhan was restricted from using sword essence, but now Guhan could use a large amount of sword essence without restraint. Under such circumstances, the second appearance of the chaotic Golden Lotus, in reality exploded with a powerful damaging and penetrating ability. Even Adam's divine body could not resist the effects of the chaotic Golden Lotus's hidden force. Although the layer of skin on the surface of the fleshly body was unscathed, but the muscles under the skin had already been twisted into a lump of meat paste by Gu Xuanyuan's sword Qi. This time, Gu Xianyuan used the execution immortal sword in his hand to easily draw a circle and successfully broke Adam's fleshly body. This time, it's time for a fly to die, right? Feeling her Yongli dagger stabbing into Adam's body, Asuka couldn't help but think proudly. But at this moment, a buzzing sound like that of a fly rang in her ears. What's going on? Asuka raised her head in panic, and following the source of the sound, she saw that there was a black line on the top of her cockpit that was constantly extending forward. Soon, this black line extended into a closed oval. No! Asuka hurriedly wanted to activate the ejection button and eject the cockpit from the body of number 2 aircraft. But she immediately acted, and a powerful arm stretched out from the broken cockpit entrance, and a fist directly hit Asuka's head. Asuka's eyes instantly rolled back, and she directly fainted, and was forcibly pulled out of the cockpit by this arm. What happened? When the smoke formed by the missile explosion gradually dissipated, the body of number 2 aircraft once again appeared in front of everyone. But whether it was Yuan Ko or the sword-bearers, they were deeply puzzled. The number 2 aircraft that was alive and kicking and constantly firing all kinds of missiles just now. At this moment, it suddenly stood motionless in the same place like a statue, as if it had lost all its life force. Look at the neck of number 2 aircraft. Feathered Serpent God, who had the sharpest eyes, was the first to discover what happened to number 2 aircraft. There was a hole in the neck of number 2 aircraft, and a human sword-bearer grabbed the bright red Asuka and jumped out of the neck, and in an instant, returned to the city wall. A universe-level Yuan Ko, the pilot of the New Era Evangelion, my lovely Asuka was captured just like that? Feathered Serpent God shook his chest in a somewhat stupefied manner, and looked at Alessandra, who was also stupefied, and said, "How would I know?" Alessandra also had an expression of great pressure. Although the strength of that woman Asuka is terrible, and she can't even compare to a ghost-level Yuan Ko, it's impossible for me to break the defense of her cockpit. But even if I want to break the defense of her cockpit, it's impossible. How did this spirit sword-level sword-wielder do it? I understand, it must be that Emperor sword-level sword-bearer who secretly made a move. Feathered Serpent God said with certainty. That's right. I guess so too. Alessandra echoed. Chapter 11:17. So painful, broken bone, really broken bone. Ling Boli, you stupid woman. I, Asuka, will not let you go. Asuka was like a dead dog, as she was directly thrown onto the city wall from more than 100 meters in the air by Gu Xianyuan. As a result, there was a clear cracking sound as Asuka's leg bone was directly broken. No way. This is a U-level Yuan Ko, and it's broken so easily? Asuka fell right next to a safety wall. The swordsmen inside the safety wall all poked their heads out and spoke in disbelief. They couldn't believe that a U-level Yuan Ko could actually break his leg bone after falling from a height of 100 meters. This didn't make any sense at all, okay? The words of these swordsmen also entered Asuka's ears. Asuka's ears instantly turned red with shame and anger, and she couldn't criticize Ling Boli like before. I really don't know how you guys study Yuan Ko normally. That new era gospel mecha is only a U-level Yuan Ko, and its pilot is just a Yuan Ko that's slightly stronger than the average person. It's already a miracle that he didn't lose his life after falling from the sky. What's so strange about a mere broken bone? Sword Immortal Ling Su instantly traversed through space and arrived near Asuka. He spoke to the chattering sword-wielding cultivators around him, answering their questions. I was the one who captured you. What does that have to do with Ling Boli? Gu Xianyuan slowly descended from the sky. She was very curious as to why Asuka would yell at Ling Boli. Humph. If it wasn't for Ling Boli's delay on the way, and Machine Zero wasn't by my side, so I couldn't use my at stance, how could I have lost to a shameless woman like you? If I could use my at stance, even 10 of you wouldn't be a match for me. Asuka grimaced as she spoke, as if the reason for her failure was completely because of Ling Boli. Lung Qingqiu finally remembered that the new era gospel did indeed have the at-stance ability, but it just hadn't been used yet. Lung Qingqiu had thought that Asuka had been careless, but it turned out that this at-field could only be used when 2 new era Evangelions were present. At-field was the strongest defensive skill of the new era Evangelion. It was similar to a sword wielder's personal shield. It could defend against all attacks. In other words, as long as the attack existed, it could be defended. What was even more frightening was that this at-field was not like the sword wielder's personal shield, which had a certain energy limit. As long as all the energy of the personal shield was consumed, it could be broken by the sword wielder's personal shield. New Age Evangelions at field did not have this limitation. Its defensive energy had a limit, but there was no energy consumption. A large number of attacks would never run out. There were only 2 ways to break through the defense of an at-field. One was to use an attack that exceeded the upper limit of the at-field's defense. The other way was to use another at-field of the same origin to neutralize the opponent's at-field. From the incomplete New Era Evangelion CD-ROM that humans found in the ruins, the at-field was actually a biological field that every living creature possessed. Generally speaking, the biological field of a living creature did not have any defensive capabilities. However, the New Era Evangelion strengthened and modified this biological field into an at-field that could defend against everything. Don't blame your partner. Don't forget that I'm a human, and I didn't activate my personal shield during the battle. Gu Xianyuan said to Asuka faintly after thinking for a while. Asuka didn't feel good after hearing this. The at-field of the New Era Evangelion originated from the legendary ancestors of mankind, Adam and Lilith. Therefore, the at-field of the New Era Evangelion was actually homologous to the at-field of the human race. This way, as long as the sword wielder did not activate his personal shield and relied on his own body to get close to the New Era Evangelion, then the at-field of the human race could perfectly neutralize the at-field of the New Era Evangelion. The at-field of the New Era Evangelion was meaningless to the human race. However, how many humans in this world could rely on their own body to fight against the New Era Evangelion without activating their personal shield? Therefore, our Miss Asuka had never encountered such a situation before. How could this be? I actually lost to a pure human. Asuka's spirit seemed to be on the verge of collapsing from Gu Xuanyuan's words. I really don't understand you animals. You're clearly humans, but you still look down on us like this and even try to destroy us humans. You're all F***king trash, you're even worse than animals. Sword Immortal Ling Su said indignantly. This was also the mentality of many humans. Although the original mission of the Yuan Ko was to destroy the human race, this was the fundamental reason for their existence. However, when they thought about the fact that the other party was also a human, many humans felt extremely uncomfortable and furious. Humans are incomplete. They're the most useless, the most trashy creatures. They shouldn't exist in this world in the first place, Asuka murmured with her head lowered. Her words were filled with resentment towards humans. This made Gu Xianyuan feel very strange. Most of the human Yuan Ko continued to fight humans because of their filth, but this Miss Asuka seemed to hate humans from the bottom of her heart. Even if there was no filth, her ultimate goal was probably to destroy the human race. There's nothing to say to this kind of Yuan Ko. Just kill her with one strike. With the credit of killing 2 universe rank Yuan Ko, and with me as your witness, there might still be a chance for the situation with Shi Jiuyuan. Sword Immortal Ling Su shook his head and suggested to Gu Xianyuan. At the same time, he also indicated that he hoped to use the credit of killing 2 universe rank Yuan Ko to make up for the fact that Gu Xianyuan killed Shi Jiuyuan. Unless I become the emperor, there's no point in killing more universe rank Yuan Ko. Moreover, I don't think killing Shi Jiuyuan is a mistake, so there's no need to use the credit to make up for it. Master Ling Su, you don't need to say anything more, Gu Xianyuan said indifferently, as if she didn't care about Shi Jiuyuan at all. As for this Asuka, there's no rush to kill her. Didn't she say earlier that Ling Boli was delayed on her way here? I'm afraid that she'll arrive outside of Yuzhong City soon. At that time, with Asuka in our hands, we'll be able to make her hesitate. I didn't think of that. Hearing Gu Xianyuan say this, Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't say anything else. On the other hand, when Asuka heard that Gu Xianyuan planned to use her to threaten Ling Boli, she instantly exploded. Her leg was clearly broken, but she still used her hands to prop herself up. She clenched her teeth and said fiercely, "You're going to kill me now? I don't want to owe that B***th any favors." Slap. Gu Xianyuan slapped Asuka's head, causing the blonde girl to faint. Then, she threw Asuka into the nearby safety wall and handed her over to the sword-bearers inside the wall to watch over. Since Asuka was no longer piloted by the gospel of the new era, she was just an ordinary human. These sword-bearers were enough to keep a tight watch on her. As for whether or not these sword-bearers would do something indescribable to the beautiful and adorable Asuka, Gu Xianyuan couldn't be bothered to care. It was just Yuan Ko. If he was raped, then so be it. It was a good opportunity for everyone to vent their anger after fighting for so long. Following the defeat of the new era's gospel of the new era, the Japanese Yuan Ko army brought by Asuka began to slowly retreat before they could even get close to the city wall. If it weren't for the fact that Asuka was still alive, the entire Japanese army might have begun to collapse. F***ck. I can't go on like this anymore. I'm done playing. Seeing that Asuka had been captured alive by the enemy in just a few minutes, Alessandra suddenly became even more terrified. At the same time, the heavy losses of his own troops also made Alessandra unwilling to continue fighting a war of attrition. He began to slowly order his troops to retreat. Naturally, Quetzalcoatl couldn't continue fighting alone. When Alessandra gave the order to retreat, he also ordered his troops to retreat. Thus, in the blink of an eye, the entire city wall fell silent. There wasn't a single living Yuan Ko to be seen. This scene caused the sword-bearers inside the safety wall to cheer again. This was a victory for them. At the same time, these sword-bearers also rushed out from the safety wall and put their sword maidens back into their scabbards to speed up the recovery of the energy of their personal shield. Humans began to quickly recover their lost energy. At the same time, there were only 2 hours left before the super-dimensional wall system was reactivated. As long as they held on for another 2 hours, the thrilling defense of Yuzhong City would completely end, and Yuzhong City would usher in another victory. But would things really go so smoothly? Chapter 11-18. Just as the morale of the human army was soaring high on the battlefield, a large cloud of golden light suddenly appeared at the end of the sky. Waves of impassioned drumming could be heard coming from the cloud. When this cloud neared Yuzhong City, one could see elite warriors dressed in silver armor standing on top of it. It's the heavenly court's heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, they're finally here. The sword-bearers in the safety wall suddenly became a little flustered. Even though they had already anticipated the arrival of the heavenly court's army. But when the army really appeared, the sword-bearers couldn't help but feel a little panic. I wonder which deity from the heavenly court has come this time. Sword Immortal Ling Su said worriedly as he looked at the densely packed heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in the sky. It's most likely Erling Shin Yang Jian, Gu Xianyuan said with certainty. Oh? Why? Sword Immortal Ling Su asked curiously. Master Sword Immortal Ling Su, you're from Los Angeles after all, so you don't know much about our Yuzhong City's history. Ever since Yuzhong City was founded, Erling Shin Yang Jian has never been absent from any of the heavenly court's attacks on Yuzhong City. I think this time will be no exception. Gu Xianyuan said with a slightly playful expression, to our Yuzhong City, Erling Shin Yang Jian is our most familiar old friend. Sure enough, when the heavenly court's large golden cloud stopped, a small purple cloud flew above Yuzhong City by itself. On it stood an extremely handsome great general dressed in shining golden armor with a single eye on his forehead. It was Erling Shin Yang Jian, an old friend that everyone in Yuzhong City was very familiar with. Yuzhong City scoundrels, how dare you fight with me, Erling Shin? This heavenly court official's son, the Jade Emperor's nephew, Comrade Yang Jian, waved the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand in provocation. Seeing Comrade Yang Jian's challenge, both the sword-bearers in the safety wall and the civilians in the underground shelters felt a headache coming on. This kind of challenge was also an old trick that the people of Yuzhong City were most familiar with. Every time Yang Jian represented the heavenly court to besiege Yuzhong City, Yang Jian would jump out and challenge the sword-bearer of Yuzhong City to a duel. This gave the people of Yuzhong a headache. Yang Jian's one-on-one fight was not just a simple one-on-one fight, but it was a tacit agreement between Yang Jian and Yuzhong City. If Yang Jian lost in a one-on-one fight, then Yang Jian and his subordinates, the 6 brothers of the Maiden Mountain, would not participate in the subsequent attack on Yuzhong City. Even if the high and mighty Jade Emperor spoke, Yang Jian would still keep his promise. He had never broken his promise. Do not underestimate the combat strength of Yang Jian's 1,200 grass gods. Each of them was equivalent to a spirit realm Yuan Ko, and after being trained by Yang Jian for a long time, they had grasped a powerful formation. When these 1,200 grass gods worked together to cast this formation, it was equivalent to the combat strength of a universe realm Yuan Ko. What was even more terrifying was that Yang Jian himself could combine with this formation. Once combined, Yang Jian's combat strength could break through the universe realm and reach the flood realm. One could imagine the threat he posed to humans. Being able to make such a terrifying opponent withdraw from the battle ahead of time would undoubtedly greatly relieve the pressure on Yuzhong City. On the other hand, if Yang Jian won, then the defeated sword mistress and her sword-bearer would be taken to his Erlang Supreme Temple at the mouth of the river to be servants for 3 years. The sword mistress would be responsible for bringing tea and water to Yang Jian, while the sword-bearer would be responsible for cleaning the entire temple. This could be said to be a great humiliation, but fortunately, Yang Jian would kill the sword-bearer like the other Yuan Ko. As long as the losers obediently worked for 3 years, Yang Jian would be able to release them in one piece. In terms of life and death, they would not be in any fatal danger. Purely from the perspective of victory and defeat, this one-on-one battle was actually a great advantage for Yuzhong City. If Yuzhong City won, they would be able to eliminate an opponent equivalent to a flood realm Yuan Ko. If Yuzhong City lost, they would only have to pay the price of an immortal sword-level sword-bearer's pride and 3 years of time. No matter how one looked at it, this was a very good deal, but Yuzhong City rarely made such a deal. This was because Yang Jian's ability was too high. Unless there was an immortal sword-level sword-bearer who coordinated with the top few immortal sword-level sword-mistresses, there was no doubt that Yang Jian would lose in a one-on-one battle. Since the result was certain that Yang Jian would lose, there was naturally no point in betting. Therefore, although Yang Jian would challenge Yuzhang City every time, there were very few records of Yuzhang City actually accepting the challenge. It was less than 1 out of 10 times. Therefore, Yang Jian thought that his challenge this time would be as fruitless as before. After a habitual yell, he prepared to return to his celestial army and prepared to deploy troops to attack Yuzhang City. Suddenly, a devastatingly beautiful woman rose from the walls of Yuzhang City and stood opposite Yang Jian, facing him in the sky above Yuzhang City. Oh! I didn't expect Yuzhang City to be so bold this time. They actually dare to send someone to fight me one-on-one. Yang Jian's expression was a little surprised and a little disdainful. Hey! Do you want to fight me, Yang Jian, one-on-one? Yang Jian narrowed his eyes and raised his chin. He spoke to Gu Xianyuan in a condescending tone. That's right. Could it be that divine Erlang True Lord is afraid? Gu Xianyuan imitated him, and her tone was just as disdainful. Do you know the rules for fighting me one-on-one? If you don't, you'd better ask your elders. Otherwise, you'll have to spend 3 years crying at my place, Yang Jian mocked. Of course I do. Gu Xianyuan nodded and said. First, you are not allowed to send an Emperor Sword Mistress or an Emperor Sword Wielder to fight you. Gu Xianyuan stated Yang Jian's first rule. Yang Jian was a universe-level Yuan Ko. If he sent an Emperor Sword Mistress or an Emperor Sword Wielder, Yang Jian would definitely lose. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with this rule. Second, you are not allowed to enter the emptiness. Whoever enters the emptiness will be considered the loser. This was Yang Jian's second rule. Erlang Shen, Yang Jian, liked to fight to his heart's content. Moreover, once one side fell into the void and sincerely tried to stall for time, the battle would become devoid of passion. This was something Yang Jian deeply hated, so he took the initiative to propose this rule. Third, the sword wielder is not allowed to change sword mistresses. Yang Jian is also not allowed to summon his howling celestial dog to help. This was the rule that Yang Jian and the sword wielder had proposed. If the sword wielder could change sword mistresses, then the sword wielder could engage in an endless battle of attrition. As long as he used a low-level sword mistress to stall for time, he could allow the celestial sword mistress to recover a lot of protective shield energy. To Yang Jian, this was undoubtedly very disadvantageous. Moreover, Yang Jian's howling celestial dog was an underworld-level Yuan Ko. If it fought with Yang Jian, it could greatly strengthen Yang Jian's fighting ability. This was something that the sword wielder could not accept. Therefore, both parties had come to this tacit agreement. Chapter 11-19. Humph. You people from Yuzhang City seem to be very familiar with these rules. Erlang Shen Yang Jian nodded his head in disdain and mercilessly mocked. Since you know the rules, then let your immortal sword-level sword wielder come out and fight with me. This is really strange. Your immortal sword-level sword wielder has the guts to fight with me, but doesn't dare to face me face. You can only send out a junior. This is really laughable. I think Lord Xianxing Erlang Shen Jun may have misunderstood. The one fighting with you is not someone else, but this insignificant one. Gu Xianyuan said proudly. You! Erlang Shen Jun's face finally revealed a shocked expression. He carefully looked at Gu Xianyuan up and down, and still asked in disbelief. I didn't misread your level right. Little girl, what's wrong with you? A mere spirit sword-level sword wielder actually has the guts to challenge me. Don't tell me you want to serve me tea that much? I think you should put away your guts and call out your cowardly immortal sword-level sword wielder. Yang Jian shook his head. May I ask Xianxing Erlang Shinjun, in your rules, is there a rule that spirit sword level sword wielder cannot participate in the battle? Gu Xianyuan asked without changing her expression. That's not it. Yang Jian shook his head helplessly. From this question, he already understood Gu Xuanyuan's intention. Then there was nothing more to say. Hurry up and defeat this little girl, so as not to waste time here. Fine. Since you want to be my maid, I won't stop you. Release your sword, lady. Yang Jian said with a disinterested look. No need, let's start the battle now. I'm still waiting to go back to eat. Gu Xuanyuan's words almost choked Yang Jian to death. You little girl, you really don't know what's good for you. With your shallow years, what abilities do you have? Hurry up and release your sword, lady. Otherwise, if I'm not careful, I might just cut off your head. That wouldn't be worth it. Although Yang Jian's words were mocking, there was a rare sense of concern in his words, as if he was protecting Gu Xianyuan's life. Dare I ask, true monarch Xianxing Erlang, is there a rule in your rules that only the sword maiden herself can fight, and the sword wielder cannot fight with you? Gu Xianyuan once again rebutted true monarch Erlang's words. Immortal Erlang Yang Jian didn't say anything. He just felt a nameless fire rising from his heart and quickly burning his whole body. Since you don't know what's good for you, little girl, don't blame me for being ruthless. True monarch Erlang Yang Jian raised the three-pointed, double-edged saber in his hand and said in an awe-inspiring manner, This true monarch will stand here and not move. I will give you 30 moves. If you can make this true monarch take a step back, then this true monarch loses. Tisk. Gu Xianyuan spat. Is this Erlang Zhenjuan's head filled with shit? At a time like this, he was still trying to act cool. Even if there was no shit in his head, Gu Xianyuan would beat the shit out of him. First move, Primal Chaos split the heavens. True monarch Erlang gave Gu Xianyuan 30 moves. However, Gu Xianyuan wanted to end true monarch Erlang in a single move. Therefore, she started off with the first move of the Primal Chaos sword art. It was also the most violent single-target attack move in the Primal Chaos sword art. Although the move, Primal Chaos split the heavens, was extremely powerful, it looked ordinary on the surface. It was like a move used by a 3-year-old child. Therefore, when Gu Xianyuan used this move, true monarch Erlang Yang Jian didn't care about this move at all. He only slightly raised the two-pointed saber in front of him vertically. In true monarch Erlang Yang Jian's imagination, this vertical move would be able to seal off all of Gu Xuanyuan's following move. She would be able to receive it effortlessly. As for the beginning of the story, it was just as Yang Jian imagined. The three-pointed, double-edged saber in his hand had indeed blocked Gu Xuanyuan's sword. However, Yang Jian's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly felt that the three-pointed, double-edged saber in his hand had transmitted a burst of heaven and earth-splitting power. Under his carelessness, Yang Jian was caught off guard. He didn't even have the time to use the immortal energy in his body. The three-pointed, double-edged saber in his hand had already left his hand and flew a few hundred meters away. You! Yang Jian's words hadn't even left his mouth. Gu Xuanyuan's following attack was like a surging tide. Yang Jian, who had lost his weapon, was suffering from his previous words. He couldn't move his body to avoid Gu Xuanyuan's attack. He also couldn't retrieve his weapon, the three-pointed, double-edged saber. He could only use his pair of flesh palms to deal with the spiritual sword in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. Even if this true monarch only has one hand left, I'm still not someone that a junior like you can bully. Yang Jian's heart was embarrassed and angry. He decided to bring out 70% to 80% of his ability. At the same time, he began to circulate the 9 revolutions mysterious art. Yang Jian's pair of flesh palms that were originally the color of flesh instantly turned golden. It was as if they were made of pure gold. The 9 revolutions mysterious art was the strongest body refining divine art in the legends. When cultivated to an extremely profound level, the body would be like the hardest iron and stone in the world. It was not the slightest bit inferior to those famous spears and swords. So one must not underestimate this pair of flesh palms. Purely from the strength of the weapon, the hardness of this pair of flesh palms was not inferior to Yang Jian's weapon, the three-pointed, double-edged saber. And it was precisely because Yang Jian had this divine art to protect his body that he dared to continue to fulfill his promise. He planned to use his own flesh palms to deal with Gu Xuanyuan's next attack. But after just a few moves, Yang Jian began to regret it. Because this woman's strength was far beyond Yang Jian's imagination. First of all, the opponent's swordsmanship was like a heavenly steed soaring through the sky. Completely violated all the common sense in the world. 1 second she was still in front of Yang Jian. The next second, the blade had already circled to Yang Jian's back. And all of Yang Jian's skill in using weapons fell on the body of the three-pointed, double-edged saber. He didn't have any achievements in his palm technique. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even touch Gu Xuanyuan's weapon. His body was already cut by Gu Xuanyuan more than a dozen wounds. A large amount of immortal blood gushed out from the wounds. It made Yang Jian's body stained with blood. Ah! At this time, Yang Jian could no longer care about the promise of not moving for 30 moves. His body suddenly leaped into the air, dodging Gu Xuanyuan's next attack. At the same time, his pair of flesh palms grabbed the Zhu Xian sword in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. The 9 revolutions mysterious art was operated to the extreme, trying to directly break the sword lady in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. For Yang Jian, this was not something impossible. The 9 revolutions mysterious art was unparalleled in the world. The number of spirit sword lady that Yang Jian had broken in his hand was not less than 1,000. Even if he couldn't break this sword lady in one strike, Yang Jian believed that he could still give this sword a fatal blow. After a few more strikes, it would break. But what Yang Jian did not expect was that when he grabbed the sword with both hands and prepared to exert force, a familiar feeling gushed out from the sword. The sharp sword qi spun and Yang Jian felt his hands loosen. All 10 of his fingers were separated from Yang Jing's hands in an instant, falling down like flowers scattered by a celestial maiden. It was just a single sword qi, but it actually directly cut off all 10 of Yang Jian's fingers. Zhu Xian's sword. Yang Jian was too familiar with this feeling. He was so familiar with it that even after 10,000 years, he still firmly remembered it, never forgetting it for a moment. Chapter 11:20. Woman, why is the execution immortal sword in your hands? This time, Yang Jian completely disregarded the promise of not moving. He flew back a few dozen steps, and at the same time, reached out his hand to summon the three-pointed, double-edged blade back. However, although the weapon was back in his hands, Yang Jian still did not feel the slightest sense of security. Who asked Gu Xuanyuan to hold such a terrifying execution immortal sword? What's so strange about the execution immortal sword being in my hands? Gu Xuanyuan brandished the sword. It hasn't even been 30 moves, but you've already broken your promise. Does that mean I've won? Yang Jian's face instantly swelled up like a pig's liver. This kind of embarrassed expression was rarely seen on the wise and extraordinary handsome Erlang true monarch Yang Jian. This true monarch has lost. This true monarch keeps his word. Yang Jian was still the Erlang true monarch after all. He readily admitted his defeat. However, Yang Jian continued, but this true monarch is not convinced. You're just relying on the execution immortal sword in your hands. Without the sharpness of the execution immortal sword, you are no match for this true monarch. Why is the dignified Erlang true monarch spouting so much nonsense? Gu Xuanyuan simply ignored Yang Jian's provocation and said with a look of disdain, "If you don't want to keep your promise, then let's fight again. I, Gu Xuanyuan, will accompany you to the end." Nonsense. Once I say it, I will never go back on my words. I have already admitted defeat just now. My 1,200 grass-headed gods, howling celestial hound, and other subordinates will immediately withdraw from the battlefield. I will not go back on my word. As soon as Yang Jian's voice fell, a part of the golden cloud in the sky parted and slowly retreated in the direction it came from. In just a few minutes, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had never come to Yuzhang City. Then what do you mean, Erlang true monarch? Gu Xuanyuan's expression eased up a lot. In addition to my 1,200 grass gods, the heavenly court still has 50,000 celestial soldiers and generals here. If these 50,000 celestial soldiers and generals all attack Yuzhang City, I'm afraid you will also suffer heavy losses. Yang Jian laid out his bargaining chip. Then what does Your Highness Erlang want me to do in order to be willing to return these 50,000 celestial soldiers? Gu Xianyuan saw through Yang Jian's intentions and asked. Very simple, you and I will fight again, but you are not allowed to use the Zhu Xian sword, you must change to another sword. After half a day, it turned out that this was Yang Jian's purpose. The information from the Sword Council clearly states that this true monarch Erlang, Yang Jian, is someone who cares about his reputation. Being defeated by a human like me without releasing the sword Maiden will definitely embarrass him, so he has to defeat me again. But the immortal slaying sword in my hand has an extremely high damage bonus to Yuan Ko, who is higher than the dragon level. Even Yang Jian's 9 revolutions mysterious art can't resist the sword chi of the immortal slaying sword. So, as long as I have the execution immortal sword in my hand, Yang Jian won't have the guts to continue fighting with me. That's why he wants me to give up the execution immortal sword. In just a few words, Gu Xianyuan had completely guessed Yang Jian's thoughts. I'm afraid that's impossible. Gu Xianyuan shook her head and said, My current situation is a little special. My arm has already become one with the execution immortal sword. I can't let go of the execution immortal sword. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint true monarch Erlang. Become one? True monarch Erlang, Yang Jian's third eye on his forehead suddenly opened. A scarlet light shot out from his third eye, directly shooting at Gu Xianyuan's hand that was tightly holding onto the execution immortal sword. Not long later, Yang Jian's third eye closed once again, his expression solemn as he nodded and said, That's right, the current you is indeed unable to let go of the execution immortal sword. Since that's the case, then I hope that true monarch Erlang will fulfill his promise and leave quickly. I will deal with these 50,000 heavenly soldiers, there's no need for true monarch Erlang to worry. Gu Xianyuan immediately said. How about this? Yang Jian still didn't give up. You can still use the execution immortal sword, but you are not allowed to use any sword essence. I also won't use any immortal energy. You and I will fight on this city wall with just our physical bodies. We'll definitely win and lose. How about that? Yang Jian's suggestion sounded very fair, but in reality it was very unfair. What kind of cultivation technique was Yang Jian cultivating? That was the famous 9 revolutions mysterious art, that was the most profound body cultivation technique in the world, it trained the strength of the physical body. At this moment, even if Yang Jian didn't use his immortal energy, he still had the strength of a U-realm Yuan Ko, but on the contrary, if Gu Xianyuan didn't use sword essence, the difference between her and Yang Jian's physical body was like a high-speed rail and a green train, they weren't even on the same level. Gu Xianyuan saw through Yang Jian's thoughts, she snorted in disdain and said, True monarch Erlang really has the face to speak, how about I use sword chi, and true monarch Erlang use saber chi to fight, our weapons won't cross. True monarch Erlang won't have to worry about being injured by my execution immortal sword. Yang Jian was choked by Gu Xianyuan to the point that he was speechless. Gu Xianyuan's suggestion sounded fair, but in reality, it was as unfair as Yang Jian's suggestion. Yang Jian was proficient in close combat. Although he had great attainments in the three-pointed, double-edged blade, Yang Jian had never meticulously studied a technique like saber chi. This was because his powerful close combat ability did not require him to study such a technique. On the contrary, every sword wielder was very proficient in sword chi. After all, sword wielder wouldn't dare to expose their physical body to the enemy's direct attack, so if they were to compete in saber chi and sword chi, the one who would lose would undoubtedly be Yang Jian. Ah! True monarch Erlang Yang Jian's face turned red. He wanted to shout out loud to vent the depression in his heart, but he was the dignified true monarch Erlang Yang Jian. If he really shouted like that, then his reputation would be ruined. Just when Yang Jian was at his wits' end, Gu Xianyuan suddenly spoke up. If you want me to compete according to true monarch Erlang's suggestion, then it's not difficult, as long as true monarch Erlang agrees to one condition of mine. What condition do you want? Yang Jian immediately asked back impatiently. Simple, if I lose, then I will naturally be at true monarch Erlang's disposal. But if I win, then true monarch Erlang will serve my Yuzhang city for 30 years. How about it? I also don't need true monarch Erlang to serve me tea. I just need true monarch Erlang to move your immortal cave to a nearby mountain range. If there is any blind Yuan Ko that dares to offend my Yuzhang city, then I hope that true monarch Erlang will first fight for my Yuzhang city. The condition that Gu Xianyuan mentioned was actually a copy of true monarch Erlang Yang Jian's condition, but compared to true monarch Erlang Yang Jian's condition, the time was extended from 3 years to 30 years, and also added in the condition that he must fight for humanity. It could be said to be extremely excessive. Would this true monarch Erlang really agree to such a condition? Chapter 11:21. How's the battle going? A girl in a tight white outfit suddenly appeared in Yuan Ko's camp outside Yuzhang City. Alessandra was startled by the sudden voice. He turned his head and let out a long sigh of relief. Miss Ling Boli, you're finally here. Yes, the girl who suddenly appeared was none other than Asuka's companion, who had been captured by Gu Xianyuan, Ling Boli, the pilot of New Era Evangelion Plane 0. Unfortunately, your comrade, Miss Asuka, was ambushed by a despicable human and captured alive. She's still in limbo right now, Alessandra said with a bitter expression. Asuka was ambushed by a human? Ling Boli's cold face turned even colder. However, seeing that New Era Evangelion Plane 02 was still standing outside Yuzhang City's city walls, her expression softened a little. Ling Boli knew that the New Era Evangelion plane and its pilot were one. If the pilot died, the New Era Evangelion Plane 0 would definitely return to the dimension. On the contrary, the New Era Evangelion Plane 0 was still standing there. At the very least, the pilot's life was guaranteed. Be more detailed. Ling Boli's words were as cold as ever. Alessandra was stunned for a moment before he understood what she meant. Although he was cursing Ling Boli's unfriendly attitude, he quickly described the battle in detail. Only then did Ling Boli notice that there was a large hole at the back of Evangelion Plane 02's neck. It seemed that Asuka had been dragged out from that hole. What an amazing opponent! A rare trace of seriousness appeared on Ling Boli's face. Even without the protection of the AT field, the opponent was able to break through the double protection of the external armor and Adam's body in such a short time, and capture Asuka alive. This strength must be extremely terrifying. Miss Ling Boli, please forgive me for being blunt, but if you want to make a move now is the best time. The human who sneak-attacked Miss Asuka is now fighting with the Erlang deity Yang Jian. There is no better time than now. Alessandra tempted. Yang Jian. Ling Boli frowned and pressed her wrist lightly. A cockpit appeared out of thin air and enveloped Ling Boli's body. In the blink of an eye, she was inserted into the body of the New Era Evangelion Machine 0, just like what had happened to Asuka. However, Ling Boli did not try to take advantage of this opportunity to rescue Asuka like Alessandra had bewitched her. Instead, she controlled Machine 0 to stay where it was. With the help of Machine 0's high-tech image tracking system, The battle between Yang Jian and Gu Xianyuan appeared in front of her at close range. Yang Jian and Gu Xuanyuan's battle had already reached an extreme level of intensity. The traces of the three-pointed double-edged blade and the Zhu Xian sword could no longer be seen with the naked eye. Ling Boli could only see countless afterimages interweaving with each other. Zero's observation system slowed down the battle by 1,000 times and found that the three-pointed, double-edged saber and the immortal vanquishing sword clashed 150 to 200 times every second, which was equivalent to a collision every 5,000ths of a second. Is the observation system faulty? Ling Boli's first reaction was to immediately get Machine Zero to start the system review. She believed that Machine Zero's observation system had made a mistake for it to produce such data. However, no matter how many times Machine Zero reviewed it, the final result was the same. Start the data comparison system. Although she was still a little reluctant, Ling Boli had no choice but to accept this result. She then started the data comparison system, wanting to see among all the data collected by New Era Evangelion, which sword-bearers could match the data of this sword-bearer before her. Comparing. There are 2 people with similar data. There are 3 people who exceed the data. According to the judgment, the most similar data is Zhetianjiandi, Qi Jingjiandi. Damn it! There's actually someone as difficult to deal with as I Ching back then. True Lord Erlang, who was caught up in the battle with Gu Xianyuan, could not help but curse. He did not know how many years it had been since he had experienced such a difficult battle. This battle reminded him of the battle with Zhetianjiandi more than 700 years ago. Back then, Zhetianjiandi had fearlessly charged into the heavenly court. Be it Neza, pagoda-bearing heavenly king Li Jing, or the 4 heavenly kings, none of them were a match for Zhetianjiandi. The scene was similar to Sun Wukong wreaking havoc in the heavenly court. However, it was different from Sun Wukong wreaking havoc in the sky. At that time, both Neza and pagoda-bearing heavenly king Li Jing had been secretly instructed by a certain shitstirrer to deliberately go easy on Sun Wukong. Of course, he had also gone easy on Sun Wukong, forcing old Lord Taishang to secretly throw out a Vajra ring to knock that crazy monkey unconscious. Only then did his clumsy acting come to an end. However, his battle with Zhetianjiandi was different. Not only did Yang Jian unleash his full strength, he even unleashed an extraordinary display in the end. However, he was still unable to stop the invincible Zhetianjiandi. After exchanging over 10,000 blows with Zhetianjiandi, Yang Jian, who had unleashed all of his trump cards, was still defeated by Zhetianjiandi in the end. The heavenly court's last shred of dignity was completely obliterated, forcing his scheming uncle, the Jade Emperor, to personally intervene. Only then did the heavenly court not be destroyed. At this moment, Yang Jian felt as if he had returned to the time when he battled Zhetianjiandi. However, his opponent had changed from a handsome middle-aged man to a beautiful young girl. Furthermore, this beautiful young girl looked to be only around 22 years old. Queen Wangshu, how powerful is this young mistress Gu Xianyuan? Can you make a judgment? Looking at this intense battle, Sword Immortal Ling Su felt his blood boil with excitement, but at the same time, he also felt deeply puzzled. Every time he felt that he had a more comprehensive understanding of Gu Xianyuan would break his understanding and display even more powerful strength. True Lord Erlang's 3-pointed double-edged blade and 9 revolutions mystical art are unparalleled. No matter how far back in the past, in terms of physical strength, there are definitely no more than 10 people who can compare to true Lord Erlang, Queen Wangshu said calmly. In other words, in terms of physical strength, young Mistress Gu Xianyuan is already one of the 10 strongest people in the world? Sword Immortal Ling Su's voice was still a little hesitant. Not one of the 10 strongest people in the world, but one of the 10 strongest people in history. Queen Wangshu added. As soon as she finished speaking, Yang Jian, who had been in a stalemate with Gu Xianyuan, was suddenly sent flying by her sword. His body shot out from the city wall like a cannonball, crashing into the New Era Evangelion Plane No. 2 behind him. Plane No. 2, which weighed at least 10 million tons, was also sent flying by True Lord Erlang's collision. Like a discarded rag doll, it spun a few times in the air before finally crashing heavily onto the ground, crushing a few hundred unlucky Yuan Ko who couldn't escape in time. On the chest of Plane No. 2, where True Lord Erlang had crashed into it, was a crater like that of a meteorite. What kind of sword technique is this? Yang Jian, who was covered in blood, reappeared before Gu Xianyuan, his voice trembling as he asked. Boundless chaos. Gu Xianyuan replied calmly. This was the 5th technique of the 7 chaotic sword techniques. Chapter 11:22. Why is the army of the heavenly court retreating? Why is this Yang Jian on the enemy's side? Alexander the Great was completely stunned by the scene in front of him. In the sky, the army of the heavenly court was retreating quickly, and that Erlang Shen was standing with the humans, looking like he had turned over a new leaf. Aya! Things changed so suddenly. What should I do? Quetzalcoatl shook her world-class breasts and said with a cute expression. Alexander the Great and the others didn't know about the bet between Erlang Shen Yang Jian and Gu Xianyuan. Of course, they didn't know that Erlang Shen Yang Jian was doing this to fulfill his promise. Alexander couldn't understand why a handsome guy like Erlang Shen Yang Jian would betray the heavenly court. I think we should retreat. Today's battle started very strangely, and it's even more strange now. Archimonde died here, and even Erlang Shen Yang Jian betrayed the heavenly court. I think there's a big conspiracy here. We should retreat as soon as possible. Alexander the Great gave a very reliable suggestion. We can't retreat. Ling Boli jumped out of her New Age Evangelion Zero and returned to the side of Alexander the Great and Quetzalcoatl God. She said coldly. However, Ling Boli only said that they couldn't retreat, but she didn't say why. Of course, this was Ling Boli's style. In fact, it wasn't hard to guess why Ling Boli didn't want to retreat. After all, Asuka had been captured by the enemy. If they retreated now, Asuka would die. Ling Boli's New Age Evangelion Machine Zero would collapse, and the power of the Fuso godly system would be greatly weakened. However, this weakening was meaningless to the Fuso godly system and the Palace of Martyrs that represented Alexander the Great. In other words, the Palace of Martyrs wanted the Fuso godly system to weaken like this. Therefore, Alexander the Great ignored Ling Boli's words and was about to order his army to retreat and leave this strange and terrifying place. However, before Alexander the Great could give the order, Ling Boli's petite white figure blocked in front of Alexander the Great. She looked at him coldly and said, "You can't leave, and neither can your army." What a joke! You think you can stop me? Alexander the Great looked at the woman in front of him in disdain. Although Ling Boli was a space-level Yuan Ko, this was all thanks to her robot, Evangelion Zero. Ling Boli was just an ordinary human, which was equivalent to a mouse-level Yuan Ko. Alexander the Great didn't care about her strength at all. He only needed to blow a breath, and this cold pilot would be blown away. He's here. Suddenly, Ling Boli, who had a stiff expression, instantly relaxed. At the same time, she looked up at the sky and said, "Look." Alexander the Great and Quetzalcoatl looked up at the sky instinctively and saw a huge, crown-like roulette in the sky. It looked like a huge spaceship. This is... Seeing this huge disk, Alexander's body could not help but tremble. This is the Ring of Perfection. Just like Alexander the Great, Sword Immortal Ling Su recognized the origin of this gigantic roulette, and he couldn't help but exclaim in horror, as if the Ring of Law that had appeared in the sky was a terrifying object that could destroy the world. I didn't think that even the Ring of Perfection would appear. This is beyond my expectations. Does the Fuso Celestial System really want to take down Yuzhong City? Gu Xianyuan muttered to herself. The appearance of the Ring of Perfection was far beyond her expectations. One of the most precious treasures of the Fuso celestial system had actually appeared on the city walls of Yuzhong City. I'm still a step too late. A golden bolt of lightning struck the city walls of Yuzhong City. When the smoke brought about by the lightning gradually dissipated, a young girl wearing a miniskirt and a school uniform appeared beside Gu Xianyuan, sword immortal Ling Su, and Yang Jian. To be able to appear in such a form, this young girl was clearly not a sword maiden. Instead, she was a powerful Yuan Ko. Be on guard. Faced with the sudden appearance of this young girl, Yuan Ko, sword immortal Ling Su immediately warned the surrounding sword-bearers at the top of his lungs, ordering them to be on guard. However, to sword immortal Ling Su's surprise, after the surrounding sword-bearers saw the young girl's face clearly, not only did they not show any signs of wariness, but they also revealed expressions of relief and excitement, as if this young girl, Yuan Ko, was their savior. This Yuan Ko is... Sword immortal Ling Su began to search through his memories desperately, trying to find information about this Yuan Ko. However, he could not come up with anything at the moment. Just as sword immortal Ling Su was about to use his personal terminal to search, Yang Jian, who had an ashen expression on his face, suddenly spoke. Misaka Mikoto, long time no see. So it's Lord Erlang. I didn't expect to see you here. Looks like I came at a bad time. Did I interrupt your battle? As Misaka Mikoto spoke, crackling lightning began to gather in her hands. She looked like she was ready to fight Lord Erlang Yang Jian. Miss Mikoto, please don't misunderstand. Lord Erlang is one of us now. Gu Xianyuan stopped her with a surprised expression. She did not expect to see Sister Mikoto again in Yuzhong City after almost 4 years. What's going on? I'm confused by you guys. Misaka Mikoto heard Gu Xuanyuan's words and instantly felt a headache coming on. However, after Misaka Mikoto saw Gu Xuanyuan's face clearly, a surprised expression quickly appeared on her face. She said dryly, "Who are you? Why do you look so familiar?" I'm Gohan's older sister, Gu Xianyuan. We're biological siblings, so it's only natural that we look similar, Gu Xianyuan explained calmly. So you're Gohan's older sister? Misaka Mikoto nodded. No wonder you two look so similar. However, Misaka Mikoto quickly thought of something and asked curiously, but Gohan told me that his parents are dead and he only has one biological sister, Gu Yun. When did he have an older sister, Gu Xianyuan, appear? Why did I confess so clearly back then? Gohan mocked himself in his heart. He had no choice but to cover it up. Gohan and I are actually half-siblings. My mother separated from my father when she was young, so Gohan didn't know about my existence. We only met each other in Shanghai Pass. The circle of nobles is really messy, Misaka Mikoto summarized. Chapter 11:23. With Misaka Mikoto's level of intelligence, she did not doubt Gu Xuanyuan's identity. She quickly believed that she was Gohan's half-sister, even if her identity was full of loopholes. After all, Gu Xianyuan and Gu Han looked very similar. Misaka Mikoto would never believe that a man as prideful as Gu Han would turn into such a beautiful woman. Therefore, other than her sister's explanation, Misaka Mikoto had no other reason to believe. At the same time, with Gohan as the intermediary between Gu Xianyuan and Misaka Mikoto naturally developed some beautiful feelings for Gu Xianyuan and instinctively began to trust her. By the way, Miss Gu Xianyuan, where's your brother Gohan? Where did he go? My old friend is here to look for him. Why isn't he coming out to see me? Misaka Mikoto repeatedly looked around but did not see Gohan. This made Misaka Mikoto very confused. In Misaka Mikoto's memory, Gohan was a man who loved Yuzhong City deeply. He was a man who would do anything for Yuzhong City. It was difficult for Misaka Mikoto to understand why such a man was not at the front line of Yuzhong City's defense line. It's like this. Sword Immortal Ling Su heard Misaka Mikoto's question and was ready to answer first. Sword Immortal Ling Su also knew that during the great attack on Yuzhong City 3 years ago, it was because of the appearance of the freelancer Misaka Mikoto that Yuzhong City was finally safe. Naturally, the people of Yuzhong City were very familiar with Misaka Mikoto's great benefactor. After recognizing her face, they instinctively let down their guard. At the same time, Sword Immortal Ling Su also recalled that the main reason why Misaka Mikoto was so willing to help Yuzhong City was because Guhan had saved Misaka Mikoto's life. They were very good friends. At that time, Yuzhong City was in an extremely critical situation. Misaka Mikoto's appearance was obviously to help Yuzhong City in the battle. Now that Misaka Mikoto had asked Gu Xianyuan about Guhan, Gu Xianyuan would definitely tell Misaka Mikoto everything without hesitation. If Misaka Mikoto found out that not only did Guhan suffer greatly in Shanghai Pass, but he was also wanted by the humans, she would definitely kill him. Only God knew if Misaka Mikoto would give up on helping Yuzhong City due to Guhan's predicament. Perhaps she might even turn around and seek revenge for Guhan. Thus, Sword Immortal Ling Su still wanted to speak before Gu Xianyuan did, temporarily concealing the truth of what had happened to Guhan. Unfortunately, Sword Immortal Ling Su's reaction was still a step too slow, and it was still Gu Xianyuan who spoke first. It hasn't been 3 years since Guhan left Shanghai Pass, so he's still in Shanghai Pass and not in Yuzhong City. To Sword Immortal Ling Su's surprise, Gu Xianyuan actually took the initiative to help him hide the truth about Guhan. At the same time, Sword Immortal Ling Su felt even more sorry for Guhan and his younger brother. Once this defensive battle was over, not only Guhan, but even Gu Xianyuan would be wanted by the Sword Commission headquarters. Just as Sword Immortal Ling Su was feeling ashamed, Gu Xianyuan silently changed the topic. Miss Mikoto, why are you here? What's with the ring of harmony in the sky? It's like this. As expected, Misaka Mikoto threw Guhan to the back of her mind and explained, I happened to pass by this area this morning and noticed that Yuan Ko's army was gathering strangely, and they're gathering in the direction of Yuzhong City. Thus, I caught a few Yuan Kos and questioned them, and found out that Yuzhong City is in trouble. That's why I immediately rushed over to support you, and I also wanted to meet my little brother Guhan. I didn't expect to meet my little brother Guhan, but my half-sister. Then what do you mean by you're a step too late? Gu Xianyuan asked again. It's all because of this stupid ring of harmony. Hearing Gu Xuanyuan's question, Misaka Mikoto's expression instantly turned ugly. I didn't expect to encounter the ring of harmony on my way here. I was planning to get rid of her before she fully unfolded, but I didn't expect that the new Era Evangelion Machine Zero would appear out of nowhere, and in the end, the ring of harmony managed to escape. Now, there's only a few minutes left before the ring of harmony completely unfolds. I can't stop them anymore. Listen to my advice, with the ring of harmony pointed at your heads. Unless an Emperor Sword Wielder intervenes, Yuzhong City won't be able to defend itself. Hurry up and retreat, it'll be too late if you delay any longer. Misaka Mikoto said in an agitated and fearful tone. The moment she opened her mouth, she immediately advised the people of Yuzhong City to retreat. This was something that Sword Immortal Ling Su and Gu Xianyuan did not expect. Sword Immortal Ling Su gritted his teeth and asked Misaka Mikoto in a tone that suggested he was lucky, Miss Mikoto, is this ring of harmony really, as the rumors say, that it can seal off all sword maidens? It doesn't seal off all sword maidens, it seals off all life forces that transcend nature. Misaka Mikoto forcefully scratched her head and said in a slightly manic tone, Actually, I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. I'm afraid that even the Ring of Harmony herself doesn't know what kind of power she has. Anyway, all you need to know is that once the Ring of Harmony completely unfolds, all sword maidens below Emperor Sword level will automatically return to their sword. All of the sword maidens in your bodies will disappear, and all of you sword wielder will become ordinary people. It can actually reach such a level. Gu Xianyuan and Sword Immortal Ling Su sucked in a breath of cold air when they heard Misaka Mikoto's words. If that was the case, then the truth was exactly as Misaka Mikoto had said. Yuzhang City could not be defended at all. That's not right, Gu Xianyuan said with a frown. If it seals off all life forces that transcend nature, then Yuan Ko's power has already transcended natural life forces as well. Does that mean that Yuan Ko will also be sealed off? As expected of Gohan's younger brother, you actually thought of this. Misaka Mikoto looked at Gu Xianyuan with an expression that said, "You're right. Yuan Ko won't be able to use magic power, immortal power, or any other power that transcends nature. Then why are we still running? At that time, Yuan Ko will only be an ordinary wild beast. Since when have we humans been afraid of wild beasts?" Sword Immortal Ling Su's expression instantly relaxed. Although the sword wielder had become an ordinary human under the effects of the Ring of Harmony, Yuan Ko had also become a wild beast. Even if these Yuan Ko turn into wild beasts, they'll still have 10 or even 100 times the physical strength of a human. Are you humans really prepared to fight a cold war? Misaka Mikoto said bluntly. Chapter 11:24. Misaka Mikoto was right. Once the Ring of Law appeared, all supernatural powers were sealed. With that, the sword-bearers were reduced to their original forms and were no different from ordinary humans. Although Yuan Ko was treated the same way and lost his magical and immortal powers, the problem was that his physical strength was terrifying. Putting aside the dinosaurs and the pterosaurs, the Macedonian army under Alexander the Great was not something that the sword-bearers could handle. At this time, the battlefield had returned to the most primitive battlefield of cold weapons in ancient times. The ones guarding the city wall were tens of thousands of militia that had never been trained before, while the ones preparing to attack below the city wall were more than 100,000 elite troops that had once swept through the entire Eurasian continent. This was not a symmetrical battle at all. Moreover, there were all kinds of monstrous Yuan Ko with terrifying physical strength below the city wall. To the humans, this was a situation where they would definitely die. At that moment, the Ring of Law in the sky suddenly emitted a colorful light that resembled the aurora borealis. "My sword mistress! My sword mistress! Sword mistress! Why can't I sense my sword mistress anymore?" As the light shone on the city wall, all the sword-bearers screamed in fear. They suddenly realized that they had lost contact with their sword mistresses. The sword mistresses who were originally standing on the city wall instantly turned back into swords. The sword mistresses of the sword-bearers had also completely lost the ability to sense their sword mistresses and could no longer control them. Of course, Yuan Ko, who was below the city wall, was also acting strangely. The first to react were the Yuan Ko who were flying in the sky. For example, the Pegasus and the Unicorn who looked the holiest and purest among them. As soon as the Ring of Law shone on them, these pure white sacred beasts instantly lost their ability to fly and fell from the sky. As the saying goes, the higher you fly, the harder you fall. Those holy beasts that were flying hundreds of meters high were smashed into meat paste when they fell. Those holy beasts that were flying shorter were not so lucky. Although they managed to survive, most of their bones were broken. They basically lost their ability to fight. Of course, it was not only the holy beasts like the Pegasus and the Unicorn that fell. All of the Yuan Ko that relied on magic power, divine power, and other unscientific powers to fly all fell down. Only the Yuan Ko that relied on their own wings to fly were still hovering in the sky. However, the number of Yuan Ko in the sky was greatly reduced. There were less than a tenth of their original number. Moreover, they had lost all kinds of magical abilities. These flying Yuan-ko were just some large sparrows. They could no longer cause any fatal damage to humans. From this point of view, the effects of the Ring of Logic were beneficial to humans. However, the situation on the ground was not so optimistic. The Yuan-ko on the ground had indeed lost a lot of their combat power under the illumination of the Ring of Law. For example, all the ghosts and necromancers like Yuan-ko. These Yuan-ko that did not conform to the laws of nature were directly scorched into steam after being shone on by the Ring of Law. The steam dissolved in the air and triggered countless dimensional vortexes. They were directly scorched to death by the Ring of Law. Apart from necromancers, other Yuan-ko that did not rely on the power of nature to survive, such as puppets and modifications, also died under the illumination of the Ring of Law. Among them, the Western pantheons suffered the most because many of their military forces were born from undead, puppets, or modifications. The huge losses made the entire Quetzalcoatl faction red with anger. In the blink of an eye, a small part of the Western pantheon's military force was gone. Moreover, most of the Western pantheon's Yuan-ko relied on the divine power in their bodies to fight. The Ring of Law had sealed their divine power, which was equivalent to completely sealing the Western pantheon's combat power. The Western pantheons were not like the Western magical beasts. Their main force was some monsters with strong physical strength. Even if the Western magical beasts' magic power was sealed, they could still fight with their strong bodies. Once the divine power of the Western pantheons was sealed, these noble gods would not be as useful as ordinary humans. As the commander of the Western pantheons this time, the Quetzalcoatl felt deep fear. At this time, even she could not mobilize any of the divine power in her body. Now, the Quetzalcoatl was just a simple woman. She did not even have the power to transform into her original body. At the same time, the Quetzalcoatl was worried that if the Fuso pantheons and the Western pantheons went to war in the future, with the existence of the Ring of Law, the Western pantheons would not even have the ability to struggle and would be strangled by the Fuso pantheons. Thinking of this, the Quetzalcoatl looked up at the Ring of Law in the sky. A different thought came to her mind. At this time, the Western magical beasts' army had been defeated. The Heavenly Court's army had also retreated under Yang Jian's orders. Only the Western pantheons, the Fuso pantheons, and the Martyr's Palace were left outside Yuzhong City. Among them, the Western pantheons suffered the most under the Ring of Law. They had lost almost 80% of their combat power. Next to the Western pantheons, the Fuso pantheons seemed to have suffered the most. This time, the Fuso pantheon's military force consisted of all kinds of strange monsters and shikigami from Fuso mythology, such as the Snow Women and the Broom Gods. Under the illumination of the Ring of Logic, the Snow Maidens lost the ice around them and turned into ordinary women with pale faces. The Broom Spirits had reverted to their original form, which was a simple broom. Other than that, many monsters and spirit-branded retainers had also lost their ability to fight. It seemed that the Fuso pantheon's losses were no less than the Western pantheons. But if one observed closely, he would discover that although the Fuso divine system had brought along broom spirits and other similar spirits, there weren't many of them. The main force that the Fuso divine system had brought this time were all kinds of monsters transformed from various animals, such as tiger demons, centipede monsters, dog gods, and so on. Even though these monsters had lost their demonic power under the illumination of the Ring of Principles and had returned to their original forms, the feathered serpent god felt that the Fuso divine branch's fighting prowess had increased greatly when he saw the truck-like tigers, train-like centipedes, and bus-like dogs. The Fuso pantheons seemed to have lost the least amount of power because most of the Yuan-ko in the Martyr's Palace were humans. Even under the Ring of Law's illumination, they were still humans and didn't look any different. As for the actual loss of combat power, only the heavens knew. "We can attack now." Ling Boli looked at the Quetzalcoatl and Alexander coldly and said, Under the illumination of the Ring of Law, those humans have turned back into mortals. They are no match for us. I don't want to play with you anymore. As soon as Ling Boli finished speaking, the Quetzalcoatl angrily rejected her. The Fuso pantheons are powerful, but the Western pantheons won't play with you anymore. It was an accident. Ling Boli frowned. The Ring of Law is just insurance. It wasn't part of the plan. The humans have turned into quails. Victory is within our grasp. Humph. It's true that the humans have turned into quails, but so have the Western pantheons. If we really take down Yuzhong City, we won't get any benefits. The Quetzalcoatl swayed her world-class apace and left Yuzhong City with her remaining subordinates without hesitation. The Quetzalcoatl's concerns were not without reason. Yuzhong City was indeed an easy plaything, and it wouldn't be difficult to take it down. However, the problem was that when the time came, the Fuso pantheons wouldn't have any difficulty destroying her. He was a Yuanko god at the universe level, and he might not even be able to defeat a small soldier under Alexander's command. It would be interesting if the Fuso divine system killed him. The feathered serpent god would never risk his life. What about you? Ling Boli looked at Alexander the Great, who was the only one left beside her. Are you leaving? Alexander the Great hesitated. What about that Emperor sword-level swordsman? An Emperor sword-level swordsman won't be restricted by the Ring of Law. If he attacks, we'll all be finished. There's no Emperor sword. Ling Boli looked at the Ring of Law in the sky. That's what she said. Then there's nothing more to say. Alexander the Great nodded. The Ring of Reason was a genuine flood-level Yuan bandit, so it was impossible for it not to sense the existence of the same level. Since the Ring of Reason said that there was no one here, then there was indeed no Emperor-level sword-wielder here. It's been a long time since I've experienced such a pure cold weapon attack. This time, let our Martyr's Palace be the vanguard. After confirming that there was no Emperor sword-level swordsman, Alexander the Great became very excited. He really liked the current situation. Just like what he said, he couldn't wait for this sudden attack with pure cold weapons. Retreat! Retreat immediately! Seeing all kinds of powerful beasts and cold weapon armies pounce toward the city walls of Yuzhong City again, and the only ones left on the city walls were countless panic-stricken swordsmen who were weaker than ordinary people. Sword Immortal Ling Su no longer held onto the illusion that they could defend Yuzhong City. He was about to give the order to retreat to the core area's dimensional barrier when Gu Xianyuan blocked his way again. Please wait, Gu Xianyuan said to Sword Immortal Ling Su. My lady Gu Xianyuan, what are you waiting for? Sword Immortal Ling Su looked at the Wangshu sword at his waist that he could no longer communicate with. His face was full of despair. Let's retreat while the city walls can still stop these beasts. Otherwise, it'll be too late. Let me do an experiment. Gu Xianyuan found a wooden chair from her safety wall. Then, with a flash of her sword, one of the wooden legs of the chair was cut off by Gu Xianyuan and appeared in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. Seeing this, Sword Immortal Ling Su, Misaka Mikoto, and Yang Jian were a little confused. But before they could figure out what Gu Xianyuan was trying to do, the wooden leg had already smashed heavily into Yang Jian's head. What are you doing? Yang Jian was furious. Although he had indeed lost to Gu Xianyuan could not humiliate him like this. How dare she hit his head with a wooden leg? Nothing. I just want to say that we've definitely won. Gu Xianyuan looked at the wooden leg in her hand and smiled happily. Chapter 11:25. What do you mean by that? Whether it was Misaka Mikoto, Yang Jian, or Sword Immortal Ling Su, none of them understood Gu Xuanyuan's words. All the sword-bearers had become ordinary people. Failure was unavoidable. How could Gu Xianyuan say that she had already won? Lord Erlang, let me ask you something. Ever since you came to this world, have you ever been hit by a piece of wood from this world? Gu Xianyuan suddenly asked Lord Erlang Yang Jian. Are you kidding me? Lord Erlang Yang Jian would never be hurt by a small piece of wood. Yang Jian's expression turned even uglier. This woman dared to doubt Yang Jian's strength. Unless it was the Heavenly Mother's peach tree of immortality, Zhen Yuanzi's ginseng fruit tree, or even the Japanese mulberry tree, there was no other wood that could hurt him. Before the wood could even get within a meter of his body, it was shredded into sawdust by his protective heavenly light. Then let me rephrase my question. Can it touch your body? Gu Xuanyuan's expression stiffened. She had failed to shake this burden, and could only change the direction of her question. Are you an idiot? Our bodies are in between dimensions in this world. Unless the wood contains the powder of the dimensional crystal stone, or we are willing to come into contact with the wood, otherwise the wood in this world will not be able to touch our bodies. At this point, Yang Jian abruptly stopped. He finally understood what Gu Xianyuan wanted to say. Looks like Lord Erlang has understood. Gu Xianyuan took the piece of wood and knocked it on Yang Jian's head again. After sufficient experiments, it has been proven that Yuenko's body is no longer in the dimension, so this ordinary piece of wood can touch Yuenko's body again. Misaka Mikoto felt as if she had been electrocuted. She immediately snatched the wood from Gu Xuanyuan's hand and knocked it on her own body. As expected, it hurt a lot. That doesn't count. Gu Xianyuan took the wooden leg from Misaka Mikoto's hand and knocked it on Misaka Mikoto's head. Only mine counts. Oh my god. What the hell is this ring of logic? It can even change the rules of our existence. Yang Jian and Misaka Mikoto raised their heads at the same time and stared at the ring of logic in the sky. Although the ring of polarity had appeared a few times before, no one had ever thought of verifying it. Even more so, no one could have imagined that the ring of polarity could even change the fundamental rules of Yuan Ko's existence in this world. Yang Jian and Misaka Mikoto fell into deep thought. After all, it was related to the rules of their existence and was extremely important to them. However, Sword Immortal Ling Su was not interested. He looked down from the top of the city wall and discovered that the fastest Yuan Ko had already begun to scale the city walls of Yuzhong City. The only fortunate thing was that the city walls of Yuzhong City were tall enough, and it was very difficult for Yuan Ko and the others to climb up without their superpowers. Therefore, their speed of climbing up the city walls was not fast. Based on this speed, the walls of Yuzhong City could delay the sword-bearers for about 10 minutes. However, this could only delay them for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the city walls would no longer belong to humans, but to Yuan Ko. Sword Immortal Ling Su urged Gu Xianyuan anxiously. Miss Gu Xianyuan, so what if the wooden legs can come into contact with Yuan Ko? Can we use these wooden legs to kill Yuan Ko? We should retreat quickly. In 10 minutes, these Yuan Ko will reach us. If we don't retreat now, it'll be too late. Of course the wooden legs can't kill these Yuan Ko. But what if they're not wooden legs, but guns? Gu Xuanyuan's words caused Sword Immortal Ling Su to stiffen. Guns. Sword Immortal Ling Su's body trembled slightly as he stuttered. That's right, guns. If they're guns, then this war will be over. Guns, the most powerful human weapon from 1,000 years ago, surfaced in Sword Immortal Ling Su's mind. Although there were special forces that used guns in this era, they were only used for special purposes. Over the past 1,000 years, 99% of the battles between humans and Yuan Ko had nothing to do with guns. The majority of humans had long since forgotten about guns. Only those who were interested in history, or those who were immersed in the glorious history of guns, retained memories of guns. If it wasn't for the fact that Sword Immortal Ling Su had gone to the prison and visited the special forces, then Sword Immortal Ling Su himself probably wouldn't have known about the existence of firearms. The reason why firearms had been eliminated by history was very simple. It was because the bullets of firearms couldn't hit Yuan Ko, whose body was in between dimensions. Although bullets with dimensional alloys could still cause damage to Yuan Ko, they were still able to cause damage to him. However, due to the existence of all kinds of strange abilities, it was often the case that millions of bullets would not be able to kill a single bandit. Such a firearm was undoubtedly a huge waste for humanity, so firearms had always been locked in the dust of history. But things were different now. Yuan Ko had already been forced out from between dimensions under the effect of the Ring of Perfection. In that case, even normal bullets could cause fatal damage to Yuan Ko. Moreover, the current Yuan Ko no longer had their special abilities. Right now, Yuan Ko was merely some powerful wild beast. He was the perfect prey for guns. If there were enough guns and bullets in hand, then what awaited these Yuan Ko would be a complete massacre. Thinking of this, Sword Immortal Ling Su became extremely excited. Sword Immortal Ling Su quickly regained his composure. He suddenly discovered an extremely important problem, a problem that made Sword Immortal Ling Su feel like his joy had been for nothing. It's useless. Sword Immortal Ling Su shook his head dejectedly. Yuzhang City only has a few hundred guns for the special forces. For 100,000 Yuan Ko, it's just a drop in the bucket. It won't be of much use at all. Let's retreat quickly. Sword Immortal Ling Su's words were not false. Because of the uselessness of guns, humans had long given up on mass production of guns in the past 1,000 years. Instead, they invested the resources to produce guns in more important areas. In the entire Yuzhang City, there were only a few hundred guns for the special forces. No, we have a lot of guns, no less than a few million guns. Gu Xianyuan shook her head and said something that made Sword Immortal Ling Su jump up in surprise. Miss Gu Xianyuan, we don't have time to joke around with you, Sword Immortal Ling Su said with a bitter expression. I don't have time to joke around either, Gu Xianyuan said as she waved at the reporter behind the nearby safety wall. The reporter jogged over to Gu Xuanyuan's side. Right now, all the shelters can see me through your camera, right? Gu Xianyuan asked the reporter. Yes, master. As long as the shelter's communication lines remain unobstructed, they can see you through my camera. The reporter immediately replied excitedly. This was the first time he was so close to Gu Xianyuan. Dear citizens. Gu Xianyuan directly aimed her face at the camera and said in a low, hoarse female voice, Right now, Yuzhang City has reached its most dangerous juncture. Right now, Yuzhang City needs your strength. I hope that everyone can fight for the safety of Yuzhang City. Need us? What use can we be? Gu Xuanyuan's words instantly caused a commotion among the citizens watching the live broadcast in the shelter. Because ordinary people were powerless against Yuan Ko, the battle had always been the swordsman's business. It would never have anything to do with ordinary people. These ordinary people had no idea that Gu Xianyuan would say something like, need them. F***ck, I don't care anymore. I'll be the first to sign up. I'll fight for Yuzhang City too. A bald man with all kinds of tattoos on his body shouted first. F***ck. Miss Gu Xianyuan, tell us, what do you need us to do? Even if you want us to die, we'll do it. The people around the bald man also shouted. Count me in. Count me in. Unexpectedly, faced with such a request from Gu Xianyuan, all the ordinary people collectively went crazy. Almost everyone expressed that they were willing to fight with Yuan Ko and were willing to contribute their strength. This seemed to be a very inconceivable thing. If an ordinary person were to fight Yuan Ko, only death awaited them. But for these ordinary people, this was a matter of course. Regardless of whether it was Yuzhang City or Yanjing City, all the ordinary people had been suppressed for too long. Because of their own powerlessness, they could only accept the fact that they were exploited and use their own contributions to exchange for the swordsman's protection. Even they themselves didn't know that their deepest desire, which had been suppressed in their hearts, was actually to be able to fight against Yuan Ko like those sword-bearers, to win the dignity and value that their lives deserved. Master Sword Immortal Ling Su. Gu Xianyuan said to Sword Immortal Ling Su in front of the camera. I hope that you can order the activation of the quantum teleportation spell formations of all the shelters and city walls, and bind a shelter to a certain section of the city wall so that the citizens of the shelters can use the quantum teleportation spell formations to reach the city wall. What do you want to do? Hearing Gu Xuanyuan's words, Sword Immortal Ling Su was completely taken aback. Then, he immediately shook his head. No, the security issue of the quantum teleportation spell formations has not been resolved yet. The Sword Committee has already ordered that all quantum teleportation spell formations are prohibited. Activating them without permission is against the rules of the Sword Committee. F*CK the rules, is this still the time to talk about rules? Gu Xianyuan spat on the ground and said viciously. She's quite pretty. Why is she spitting on the ground? Sword Immortal Ling Su muttered in a low voice. But he also knew that he was being unreasonable just now. At a time like this, who cared about the rules? But why did Gu Xianyuan order the quantum teleportation spell formations that connected the shelters and the city wall? Did he really want these ordinary people to die? Sword Immortal Ling Su wanted to ask further questions, but Gu Xianyuan had already ignored him. Instead, she continued to talk to the ordinary people in the shelters. Sword Immortal Ling Su had no choice but to follow Gu Xuanyuan's instructions and command the sword wielders who stayed behind at the control panel in the central area to activate the quantum teleportation spell formations that had been sealed for over 3 years. Under the floor below the TV, there is a floor with a skull drawn on it. You just have to hit the floor 5 times and the floor will automatically open up. There is a vacuum storage room inside, and there are countless firearms and ammunition stored there. These firearms and ammunition step onto the quantum teleportation spell formations of your shelters and come to the city wall to fight with us. Gu Xianyuan continued to speak in front of the camera. Mommy? What's a gun? What's a gun? This. Mommy doesn't know either. Hearing Gu Xuanyuan's words, most of the ordinary people were confused because they had no idea what a gun was. But some of the older or more knowledgeable humans trembled with excitement after hearing the name of a gun. They impatiently followed Gu Xuanyuan's instructions and opened the secret compartment. Sure enough, they found the vacuum storage chamber that Gu Xianyuan had mentioned. After the chamber was filled with air, everyone saw an endless pile of firearms and ammunition that formed a small mountain. Chapter 11:26. Zhao Qinfeng looked at the semi-automatic rifle in his hands excitedly and read out the name that he had been longing for. Type 95 Automatic Rifle. Zhao Qinfeng was one of the few firearms enthusiasts in this world. He was obsessed with all kinds of firearms and had spent his whole life collecting information on them. In the field of firearms research, Zhao Qinfeng was not inferior to some well-known experts. In fact, Zhao Qinfeng's earliest interest was not to become a firearms enthusiast, but to become a powerful sword wielder like all young people. However, as time went on, the sword essence in Zhao Qinfeng's body was unable to break through the 100 quark barrier. When Zhao Qinfeng was 20 years old, he completely despaired and gave up on his desire to become a sword wielder. But Zhao Qinfeng's desire to become stronger did not change. When he was unintentionally looking through historical materials, Zhao Qinfeng came across a record about firearms. This powerful weapon from before the apocalypse had completely captivated Zhao Qinfeng. From then on, Zhao Qinfeng became a loyal firearms enthusiast. He pinned all his desire to become stronger on firearms, fantasizing that one day he could use firearms to fight with Yuan Ko. Zhao Qinfeng also knew that this was only a fantasy. Not to mention the fact that firearms had lost the meaning of their existence, Zhao Qinfeng could not even get his hands on a real firearm. Although firearms could not cause any harm to Yuan Ko, they posed a fatal threat to humans. From the information in America after the apocalypse, it could be learned that almost everyone in America had a gun. Every year, there would be a large number of shootings, and the number of ordinary people who died under the muzzle of a gun was uncountable. In Yuzhong City, which was densely populated and had a very depressing existence, the Sword Committee would certainly not allow such a huge threat to flow into the hands of the people. All firearms were strictly controlled, and ordinary people had no way of getting their hands on a gun. So all this time, Zhao Qinfeng could only look at some pictures on the internet to satisfy his craving or buy some plastic models. He had never touched a real gun. Until today, when the biggest surprise came. Zhao Qinfeng had never thought that a real gun would appear in front of him in this way. Zhao Qinfeng immediately rushed to the front of the secret room and directly picked up his favorite legendary semi-automatic rifle, the Type 95 automatic rifle from the pile of guns. Be it before or after the apocalypse, the Type 95 automatic rifle was an unchanging legend. In the firearms enthusiast QQ group that Zhao Qinfeng was in, the Type 95 automatic rifle was ranked number 1 on the most desired gun list. Therefore, Zhao Qinfeng did not hesitate to snatch the Type 95 automatic rifle into his hands. Zhao Qinfeng followed what he had learned from the materials and first adjusted the sights of the gun. He loaded the clip with his trembling hands, pulled the bolt and pushed the bullet into the chamber. He chose the single-shot semi-automatic rifle and rested the butt of the rifle on his shoulder. Aiming at 3 points and a line, he adjusted the ruler to a reasonable distance, leveled the crosshair with the opening of the door, and kept it in the center. At this time, Zhao Qinfeng only needed to gently pull the trigger, and he would be able to shoot dozens of hot bullets in an instant. When the bolt was pulled and the sound of bullets entering the chamber entered Zhao Qinfeng's ears, when the 3 points and a line were completely aligned, Zhao Qinfeng felt as if he had arrived in heaven. He could not help but pull the trigger in his hand and shot out hot bullet. Fortunately, Zhao Qinfeng still had a bit of rationality. When he pulled the trigger, he aimed the muzzle at the sky. In the end, the bullets directly hit the ceiling of the fallout shelter and raised a lot of dust. "What are you doing here?" Just when Zhao Qinfeng was immersed in the pleasure brought by the gun, a slap landed on Zhao Qinfeng's face without hesitation. Zhao Qinfeng raised his head and saw a person with 2 swords hanging on his waist, looking at him angrily. Beside this person, a quantum teleportation array that had just opened was emitting a warm energy. It seemed that this sword wielder had just arrived at this fallout shelter through the quantum teleportation array. Zhao Qinfeng immediately understood that the person who slapped him was a powerful sword wielder. Instinctively, Zhao Qinfeng lowered his head with a wretched look, not daring to look at the sword wielder closely. "Are you crazy? There are people everywhere. What if the bullets hurt others?" The sword wielder scolded Zhao Qinfeng sternly. Zhao Qinfeng was a yes-man and did not dare to refute at all. In reality, Zhao Qinfeng had no right to refute anything. He did make a mistake. The fallout shelter was not a place where he could shoot at will. Forget it. The sword wielder did not have extra time to scold Zhao Qinfeng. After sizing up Zhao Qinfeng, he suddenly asked, "Do you know how to use a gun?" "Yes." Zhao Qinfeng immediately nodded. "Other than the gun in your hand, do you know how to use other guns?" The sword wielder asked again. "Yes." Zhao Qinfeng nodded again. He was one of the top firearms enthusiasts in this world. As long as there was information on a gun, Zhao Qinfeng would know how to use it. "That's great." The sword wielder breathed a sigh of relief. His expression instantly became amiable. He patted Zhao Qinfeng's shoulder like a good friend and said to him kindly, "Hurry up and go to the city wall through the quantum teleportation array and accept Miss Gu Xuanyuan's arrangement. You don't know that we can't find many people who know how to use guns at all. We have to rely on you to guide them." Under the command of this sword-bearer, Zhao Qinfeng passed through the quantum teleportation formation that he had never used in his life in a daze, and arrived on the city wall where the sun shone brightly. Under the guidance of several people, Zhao Qinfeng appeared in front of Gu Xianyuan. To be honest, the moment he saw Gu Xianyuan, Zhao Qinfeng was so excited that he could not speak. His head was filled with blood. He could not believe that he could actually see his dream lover. Yes, although Zhao Qinfeng had only seen Gu Xuanyuan's face for the first time through the live broadcast on TV a few hours ago, from that moment on, Gu Xianyuan had become Zhao Qinfeng's dream lover. Zhao Qinfeng had never met a woman who could move Zhao Qinfeng's heart like this. At that moment, Zhao Qinfeng wished that he could use his whole life to exchange for one more glance from the other. However, Zhao Qinfeng was clear in his heart that Gu Xianyuan was a high and mighty spirit sword-level sword wielder, while he was just a pathetic ordinary person. The two of them would never have any intersection in this life. Therefore, at the same time that Zhao Qinfeng was moved, he buried this feeling deep in his heart. Unexpectedly, the two things that Zhao Qinfeng most urgently hoped for in his life actually happened at the same time. One was to be able to personally control the gun that he dreamed of, and the other was to be able to stand next to Gu Xianyuan and look at his goddess so closely. For Zhao Qinfeng, this was enough. At this moment, Zhao Qinfeng was incomparably satisfied. You know how to use guns? And all the guns? Gu Xianyuan did not know what Zhao Qinfeng was thinking in his heart, but directly asked the answer that she needed to know. I know. Zhao Qinfeng nodded desperately. No man would refuse to show his wings in front of his goddess. That's good. Camera here. Under Gu Xuanyuan's command, 2 or 3 cameras were aimed at Zhao Qinfeng at the same time. At the same time, a large number of all kinds of guns were moved in front of Zhao Qinfeng. What's your name? Gu Xianyuan asked Zhao Qinfeng. My name is Zhao Qinfeng. Zhao Qinfeng raised his head and answered in a loud voice, like a peacock with its neck erect. Very good. Gu Xianyuan nodded approvingly. Comrade Zhao Qinfeng, now I'll trouble you to tell all your compatriots in front of the camera how to use all kinds of guns. Please note, we don't have much time. You must demonstrate all the guns in 5 minutes, understood? Yes. I promise to complete the task, Zhao Qinfeng said at the top of his voice. In fact, Zhao Qinfeng did not have any confidence in his heart, but his pride did not allow him to say that he could not do it in front of Gu Xianyuan. Therefore, at this moment, Zhao Qinfeng mobilized all the memories in his mind and used the limits of what he could do to demonstrate how to use all the guns around him. Perhaps the god of luck was on Zhao Qinfeng's side today. Zhao Qinfeng's entire demonstration process was very smooth. Zhao Qinfeng's memory was not forgotten, and there were no awkward accidents or interruptions in the middle. Zhao Qinfeng actually only spent a little more than 5 minutes to demonstrate all the 20 different guns around him. Moreover, the demonstration process was very clear. Anyone with a normal IQ would be able to roughly understand how to use these guns. Thank you. You've done a great job today. When Zhao Qinfeng finished demonstrating all the ways to use all the guns while sweating profusely, Gu Xianyuan said to Zhao Qinfeng very approvingly. Then, she gave Zhao Qinfeng a comradely hug. This was indeed a comradely hug, because Gu Xuanyuan's heart was still a male gohan. However, for Zhao Qinfeng, this hug had a little unusual meaning. It made Zhao Qinfeng feel as if he had been injected with chicken blood and was so excited that he could not control himself. Thanks to Zhao Qinfeng's help, those able-bodied men were able to use the guns in the shortest time possible. Then, they came to the city walls in batches through the quantum teleportation array. Very soon, the city walls of Yuzhang City were filled with hundreds of thousands of people, and this number was still rising, with faint signs of breaking through 1 million people. This was something that had never happened on the city walls of Yuzhang City. From the moment Yuzhang City was built, there had never been more than 100,000 people on the city walls. Is it really okay for us to do this? Sword Immortal Ling Su looked at the sea of people in front of him with a guilty expression. I'm afraid that most of them will die on the city walls. We have no other choice. If we don't do this, they will die at the hands of Yuan Ko sooner or later. Gu Xianyuan sighed slightly, revealing an unfathomable expression. In this case, we can save a lot of our sword bearers. Chapter 11:27. After Zhao Qinfeng finished instructing the camera, he was the first to rush to the edge of the city wall. In the end, he saw an ugly lizard climbing up the city wall to a very high place. It was only a dozen meters away from where Zhao Qinfeng was. It would take at most a minute for the lizard to climb up the city wall and start slaughtering the humans on it. You're the one. Be the first prey under my gun. Zhao Qinfeng yelled internally with all his might and pulled the trigger with his index finger. Over 30 scorching bullets were fired at the lizard's head in an instant. Zhao Qinfeng's luck was good. More than 10 of the 30 bullets successfully hit the target, creating several bloody holes on the lizard's head. One of the bullets even hit the lizard's eye. Hiss! Lizards were cold-blooded animals. One of the biggest characteristics of cold-blooded animals was that they would not make any loud sounds no matter how much damage they suffered. They could only make low hissing sounds. At the same time, when they were hurt, cold-blooded animals would not flee in panic. Instead, they would choose to launch the most intense counterattack against the person who hurt them. For example, this big lizard was climbing up more than a few times faster under the stimulation of the intense pain. Zhao Qinfeng was caught off guard. Before he could react to what was happening, the big lizard had already appeared in front of him. What? Ah! Zhao Qinfeng let out a meaningless scream. Because he was too excited just now, he had emptied the magazine, so Zhao Qinfeng had to change the magazine before he could fire again. However, the lizard was already right in front of him. By the time Zhao Qinfeng changed the magazine, he would probably be bitten into pieces by the lizard. At this critical moment, a long sword appeared out of nowhere and directly cut off the lizard's head. Zhao Qinfeng looked up in horror and saw Gu Xuanyuan's beautiful face. Be careful, Comrade Zhao Qinfeng. You're very important to us. Gu Xianyuan smiled and walked away. Zhao Qinfeng stood on the spot and took a few deep breaths. Then, he let out a long howl towards the sky and once again appeared on the city wall with the Type 95 automatic rifle in his hand. However, this time, Zhao Qinfeng was no longer fighting alone. The ordinary people who had been temporarily taught by Zhao Qinfeng walked out of the quantum formation with their own firearms and leaned against the city wall with Zhao Qinfeng. They used the firearms in their hands to form a dense net of fire. Yuan Ko, who was climbing along the city wall, suddenly encountered the fiercest and most terrifying sniper attacks. Hundreds of thousands of enraged humans raised their guns and fired their angry bullets at the Yuan Ko. These bullets formed a dense web of fire. Each Yuan Ko had to endure a dozen, dozens, or even hundreds of bullets in an instant. The Yuan Ko who rushed at the front were immediately turned into sieves by the bullets and fell from the city wall. Then, they triggered dimensional vortexes and completely left this world. Yuan Ko was successfully suppressed. More and more Yuan Ko fell from the city wall. The situation in Yuzhang City instantly turned around and became extremely favorable to the humans. I hate guns. I hate guns. I hate guns the most in my life. Seeing what happened on the city wall, Alexander the Great, who was preparing to lead his army to charge, began to howl crazily. He did not expect that things would change in such a short period of time. There were hundreds of thousands of human soldiers armed with guns on the city wall. Wouldn't this mean that the elite Macedonian warriors would be sent to their deaths? Alexander the Great shed tears in despair. These be asterisk stars. It has been 1,000 years. Where did they get so many guns? These bastards. Miss Gu Xianyuan, why are there so many guns in the sanctuary? At the same time, on the city wall, Sword Immortal Ling Su also asked Gu Xianyuan the same question as Alexander the Great. He had been the chairman of the Sword Committee of Yuzhong City for more than 2 years, but he had never heard of these guns. It's a long story. This happened during the era of Zhejiang Jiandi. Gu Xianyuan looked at the guns that were spitting fire. Yuzhong City is different from Yanjing City. Yanjing City was built on a completely new site and has nothing to do with the old Yanjing City. But Yuzhong City was built directly on the ruins of the old Nanchang City. The Gan River that passed through Yuzhong City also passed through the old Nanchang City 1,000 years ago. But what does this have to do with guns? Sword Immortal Ling Su asked in confusion. Please listen to me. Gu Xianyuan paused. Before the apocalypse, the Celestial Empire was about to carry out a new generation of equipment replacement. The old equipment that was replaced by the various military regions in the south was temporarily stored in the military warehouse of the old Nanchang City. After the apocalypse, these old equipment could not be transported away. They were still stored in the military warehouse of the old Nanchang City. This lasted for a full 200 years. 200 years later, Zhejiang Jiandi began to rebuild Yuzhong City on the ruins of the old Nanchang City. Naturally, he discovered the military warehouse and found this batch of old equipment. At that time, the entire southern military region of China replaced tens of millions of sets of equipment. After 200 years of erosion, most of the equipment had been damaged to the point of being unusable. Only about 2 million sets of equipment were barely usable. No one knows what Zhejiang Jiandi's reasons were, but Zhejiang Jiandi decided to keep all of these equipment. However, if these equipment were stored normally, it wouldn't be long before they were completely corroded. And it was unrealistic to use dimensional pockets to store these equipment. This was because dimensional pockets were a very luxurious thing at that time. There wasn't even enough for the sword bearers to use, so how could they bear to use them to store these abandoned equipment? So Zhejiang decided to build some vacuum chambers to store these equipment. Considering the lack of surface area, he simply built these vacuum chambers near the underground shelter. This way, they were stored for 800 years. I thought that these equipment would continue to stay in the vacuum chambers, but I didn't expect them to play such an important role today. Gu Xianyuan explained the origins of these guns in a few words. I see. Sword Immortal Ling Su nodded. So these equipment were stored from Zhejiang Jiandi's era. No wonder not many people knew about them. But after thinking about it, Sword Immortal Ling Su realized that something was wrong. He, Sword Immortal Ling Su, had once browsed through all the confidential information in Yuzhong City, but there was no record of this from beginning to end. Even if this Gu Xianyuan was the older sister of the previous Sword Pavilion Lord Gohan, she shouldn't know this secret. Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't hide his doubts in his heart, and directly asked Gu Xianyuan. How did Gu Xianyuan know this secret? The truth was very simple, because Zhejiang Jiandi had personally told Gohan about it. Back in the Rise from the Ground dungeon, I Ching had revealed this information to Gohan during a casual conversation. At that time, Gohan didn't think much of it, but now it seemed that he had fallen into I Ching's trap again. This was something that I Ching had prepared for him. Of course, Gohan couldn't possibly tell Sword Immortal Ling Su about his relationship with I Ching. Thus, Gu Xianyuan said with certainty, "It's true that Yuzhong City did not pass down these secrets, but don't forget, Master Ling Su. My younger brother's treasured sword is the Heavenly Sword, and the Heavenly Sword is also Zhejiang Jiandi's sword Maiden. It participated in the construction of Yuzhong City." The Heavenly Sword Maiden saw all of this and remembered it. Then, she told my younger brother Gohan, and my younger brother Gohan told me in passing. That's how I know these secrets. Gu Xianyuan smiled. So that's how it is. Look at my memory, I actually forgot about the Heavenly Sword Maiden. Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't doubt Gu Xianyuan's explanation at all. Apart from this explanation, Sword Immortal Ling Su couldn't think of any other explanation. Could it be that Sword Emperor shrouding heaven had personally told Miss Gu Xianyuan this? Zhao Qinfeng hurriedly and accurately fired the bullets from his Type 95 automatic rifle. Compared to the frenzied and unreasonable rapid fire at the beginning, Zhao Qinfeng had already discovered that burst fire was actually the most effective method of battle. Firing at a slow and uniform speed would allow him to hit the target more accurately. Although it was refreshing to have a large number of bullets raining down, the hit rate was extremely worrying. It was extremely rare for 1 or 2 bullets to hit the target out of 10. It was not as effective as firing at a slow and uniform speed. At the same time, Zhao Qinfeng discovered to his surprise that he actually had an extremely powerful talent in the art of shooting. Only 20 minutes had passed since he first fired, and Zhao Qinfeng was already able to fire a few shots without missing. Out of 10 burst fire bullets, around 8 would hit their target, and around 4 would hit their target extremely accurately. It was just like shooting at a target. 8 out of 10 bullets would hit the target, and 4 of them would hit the target between the 7th and 10th rings. This was already a very impressive number. Zhao Qinfeng had yet to discover any soldier around him who could do the same as him. In Zhao Qinfeng's eyes, the Type 95 automatic rifle in his hands was no longer a simple weapon, but a part of his body. Zhao Qinfeng's mind and body were becoming more and more closely connected to the Type 95 automatic rifle, and the accuracy of the bullets was getting higher and higher. This made Zhao Qinfeng believe that he was born for firearms, that he was a genius in the art of firearms. I want to kill even more enemies. Only then will Miss Gu Xianyuan see me. The blood in Zhao Qinfeng's heart grew stronger and stronger. It was also at this moment that a shocking screech suddenly rang out not far away from Zhao Qinfeng. A giant centipede the size of a train had actually passed through the net of firepower on the city wall and climbed onto the city wall. The sharp legs of the centipede directly minced the dozens of humans around it into pieces of minced meat. When the other humans saw this scene, they were so frightened that they couldn't control themselves, and quickly ran away from the giant centipede. As a result, a huge gap appeared in the net of firepower on the city wall. More and more Yuan Ko climbed onto the city wall through this gap, and began slaughtering the other humans around them. The Yuan Ko finally tore open a gap in the human firepower. If no one stopped them in time, then this gap would become bigger and bigger, and in the end, the entire net of firepower would collapse. Chapter 11:28. What should we do? Seeing the incoming danger, everyone present was helpless. Hurry up and get Miss Gu Xianyuan. Someone shouted loudly, suggesting to get Gu Xianyuan to come and save the situation. No way. Something happened to the northern city wall just now. Miss Gu Xianyuan has already rushed to the northern city wall. She won't be able to come over in a short time. Someone else immediately replied. Then what should we do? Let's just run. Seeing people dying under the feet of the giant centipede, more and more people planned to escape. It was also at this critical moment that Zhao Qinfeng felt his blood boiling. He took the initiative to jump out and pull a machine gunner away from his position, shouting loudly, "I'll fight you to the death." The machine gunner who was pulled away by Zhao Qinfeng was about to flip out, but when he saw Zhao Qinfeng shooting at the giant centipede with his machine gun without hesitation, he immediately felt ashamed. It should be known that this machine gunner was originally scared half to death by the giant centipede and was ready to escape. Da-da-da! A sea of bullets shot out from the machine gun in Zhao Qinfeng's hands, all of them pouring onto the head of the giant centipede. It was unknown whether it was luck or skill. Zhao Qinfeng's machine gun bullets all hit the head of the giant centipede, instantly enraging the giant centipede. It gave up on the other humans around it that were easily within reach, moving its dozens of legs and quickly pouncing towards Zhao Qinfeng's position. At this time, the giant centipede was only a few hundred meters away from Zhao Qinfeng. According to the speed of the giant centipede, It would take at most 20 seconds to reach Zhao Qinfeng's side and cut him into pieces. Go to hell. Seeing the giant centipede getting closer and closer to him, Zhao Qinfeng actually had no fear in his heart at all. On the contrary, Zhao Qinfeng stood up and pressed the machine gun against his chest, using his body to resist the powerful recoil of the machine gun, pouring out his own bullets without stopping. Zhao Qinfeng felt that the machine gun in his hands had become one with his body, just like the Type 95 automatic rifle from before. The bullets shot out by the machine gun seemed to have become a part of Zhao Qinfeng's body. Zhao Qinfeng hoped that the bullets would be able to reach wherever they were shot. Under Zhao Qinfeng's incomparably violent shooting, the equally violent giant centipede was actually restrained by Zhao Qinfeng's machine gun. When it was only 30 meters away from Zhao Qinfeng, it almost stopped where it was and took a step forward. Because at this moment more than a dozen of the giant centipede's front legs had all been shot off by Zhao Qinfeng's machine gun bullets, and were lying on the ground dripping with blood. The centipede that had lost almost a quarter of its legs had also lost the support of a quarter of its body, and could only be dragged on the ground. In this way, it was very difficult for the giant centipede to move forward, and it could only become a live target for Zhao Qinfeng. The whole process sounded very simple. It was just using a machine gun to shoot off the centipede's leg. There was no difficulty at all. But in reality, the difficulty was astonishing. Machine guns and automatic rifles were completely different. If the accuracy of semi-automatic rifles was easy to control, then the accuracy of machine guns was completely uncontrollable. Even the best shooter in the world could not guarantee that his machine gun could hit more than 10% of the target. Of course, because the giant centipede's body was large enough, it was very easy for the machine gun bullets to hit the giant centipede's body. But the giant centipede's legs were at most as thick as a mop handle. Separated by a distance of a few hundred meters, it was difficult to accurately hit the target even with a sniper rifle, let alone a machine gun that could not be controlled at all. In just a few seconds, all of the giant centipede's legs had been shot off. To put it bluntly, even the machine gun king Hain Severo could not do this. Once a beast lost its ability to move, it would become a simple target in front of a powerful gun. Zhao Qinfeng emptied the last few bullets in the chain, and the giant centipede's head was completely shot into a ball of disgusting green liquid. Then, a dimensional vortex appeared and the giant centipede was taken back. Be careful! Before Zhao Qinfeng could heave a sigh of relief, he heard a cry behind him. It turned out that a white tiger had been quietly following behind the giant centipede. After the giant centipede died, the white tiger jumped out and was less than 50 meters away from Zhao Qinfeng. It would take at most 2 to 3 seconds to reach Zhao Qinfeng and avenge the giant centipede. F***ck. I've even killed that centipede. Do you think I'll be afraid of you? Zhao Qinfeng, who had killed the giant centipede, was bursting with confidence. When he picked up the machine gun and prepared to kill the white tiger, he was horrified to find that he had dropped the chain. This was not a metaphor, but a real drop. The machine gun chain in Zhao Qinfeng's hand had been completely used up, and the chain fell out of the machine gun. Bullet chain! Bullet chain! Zhao Qinfeng shouted in horror. No matter how good his marksmanship was, it was useless in a situation where he had no bullet. However, in his panic, Zhao Qinfeng could not find an unused bullet chain in a short period of time. At this time, the white tiger had already pounced on Zhao Qinfeng. Fortunately, Zhao Qinfeng's reaction was a little fast, and most of his body avoided the white tiger's attack. However, his arm was bitten by the white tiger, leaving a bloody wound. But the danger was not over. After the white tiger's attack failed, it readjusted its direction and was ready to pounce on Zhao Qinfeng again. At this time, Zhao Qinfeng's machine gun still had not been loaded with a new bullet chain. Bullets! There are bullets here! Just when Zhao Qinfeng was about to lose all hope, a person suddenly pounced on him and loaded a brand new bullet chain into Zhao Qinfeng's machine gun. Zhao Qinfeng lowered his head and saw that the guy who had rushed over was actually the machine gunner he had just pulled away. Go to hell! When Zhao Qinfeng's machine gun was loaded again, he was no longer afraid of any opponent. The white tiger did not struggle much before it was shot into a sieve by Zhao Qinfeng. After this narrow escape, Zhao Qinfeng felt as if he had broken through a bottleneck. The machine gun in his hand became more and more smooth, to the extent that he had never missed a shot. Soon, the others discovered Zhao Qinfeng's amazing accuracy and began to follow him spontaneously, forming a sizable team. Under Zhao Qinfeng's command, they continued to advance forward, filling up the gap that had been torn by the big centipede just now, and narrowly surviving this disaster. When Gu Xianyuan came to this section of the city wall again, she was surprised to find that the humans on this section of the city wall had become orderly. Everyone was carrying out various battles in an orderly manner under the command of a small man, mercilessly killing those Yuan Ko who tried to climb up the city wall. Gu Xianyuan took a closer look. This small man was actually the guy she had just ordered to explain how to use a gun to everyone. I think he's called Zhao Qinfeng or something. Gu Xuanyuan's memory was indeed amazing. She only heard it once, and she remembered Zhao Qinfeng's name. This is a talent. Gu Xianyuan nodded thoughtfully, then walked to Zhao Qinfeng's side and patted his shoulder. Miss Xianyuan. Zhao Qinfeng was stunned when he saw Gu Xianyuan, then immediately lowered his head with a shy expression. This guy wouldn't have improper thoughts about me, would he? Seeing Zhao Qinfeng's expression, Gu Xianyuan instinctively sensed something. However, Gu Xianyuan, who was originally Gohan, could not have any thoughts about men at all. In addition, Gu Xuanyuan's body could not be maintained for too long, so Gohan did not care about Zhao Qinfeng's little thoughts and continued to speak. You're very good. Are you interested in taking over the command of the entire battle? Gu Xianyuan suddenly asked a question that Zhao Qinfeng had never thought of. Miss Xianyuan, what do you mean? I don't really understand, Zhao Qinfeng said with a trembling body. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialization. I don't think I'm inferior to anyone when it comes to holding a sword, but my understanding and use of firearms is not as good as yours. Rather than letting me command blindly, it's better to give the command of these more than 1 million people to someone more professional. At this point, Gu Xianyuan paused, then revealed an incomparably serious expression and asked, Tell me, do you have the confidence to command more than 1 million people to defend our Yuzhang city? To be honest, Zhao Qinfeng's heart was incomparably conflicted and afraid. At the thought that he would be shouldering the life and death of 1 million people, Zhao Qinfeng felt fear and dread from his bones, and instinctively wanted to refuse. However, Zhao Qinfeng suddenly thought in his mind, if he did not even have the courage to command 1 million people, then how would he have the courage and face to stand in front of Miss Gu Xianyuan in the future? Miss Gu Xianyuan would never like such a cowardly person. I can. Therefore, Zhao Qinfeng answered Gu Xianyuan with determination and a hint of guilt. Very good. I'll give the command to you. Gu Xianyuan did not waste any time and directly brought a dozen or so staff members with different tasks behind her to Zhao Qinfeng's side, telling them that from now on, they would completely accept Zhao Qinfeng's command. These staff members were responsible for contacting the temporary commanders of the various regions on the city wall. Through these staff members, Zhao Qinfeng would be able to keep track of the situation in the other regions at any time and give orders to the temporary commanders of other regions. As long as these staff members completely listened to Zhao Qinfeng's orders, then Zhao Qinfeng would be able to instantly control the millions of troops on the city wall of Yuzhang City and become the person with the most power in Yuzhang City at this moment. Chapter 11:29. Miss Ling Boli, I'm telling you solemnly that I'm not playing anymore. If this goes on, I'm just going to die," Alexander the Great said to Ling Boli with a tragic expression. They had thought that victory was in their grasp, but they had never expected that Yuzhong City would have so many old guns. Alexander the Great, who had been hoping to use the great Macedonian phalanx to fight to his heart's content with cold weapons, was in great despair. Just now, 3,000 of his most elite soldiers attempted to scale the city walls and launch a surprise attack on Yuzhong City. However, they were blanketed by a super firepower net formed by hundreds of machine guns that appeared out of nowhere. The 3,000 elite soldiers didn't even last a minute before they were riddled with bullets and returned to the dimensional vortex. It was the casualties of these 3,000 soldiers that made Alexander the Great shiver. How is the Ring of Perfect Theory helping them? It's clearly helping the humans. Under the effect of the Ring of Perfect Theory, the humans have become extremely powerful. What's the point of fighting? Just wait a little longer, Ling Boli said coldly. The situation will change soon. Change? How can it change? When will it change? Alexander the Great's face was full of disbelief. 5 more seconds. Ling Boli raised her head and looked at the towering New Age Evangelion Machine Zero behind her. She said in a low voice, "Wait another 5 seconds, and the humans will remember the fear of being dominated by Adam." 5 seconds passed in the blink of an eye. Alexander the Great soon realized that New Age Evangelion Machine Zero's body began to shake. Suddenly, a piece of armor fell from the chest area of the machine. An unlucky Yuan Ko was caught off guard and was smashed into a pile of meat paste by this piece of armor. This piece of armor that fell was just a signal. Soon, more and more armor fell from Zero's body. In just 3 minutes, not a single piece of armor was left on Zero's body. Everything fell off. This is... Alexander the Great's eyes widened. When all the armor fell automatically, the thing hidden deep inside the armor was completely exposed. It was a huge giant with an ugly face that looked like a ghost's eyes and nose. However, it was obvious that it was a human's face. This is Adam. Alexander the Great suddenly remembered what Ling Boli said, and he murmured to himself, "Could this be the legendary ancestor of humans? There was no Christianity in your time? How do you know about Adam?" Ling Boli suddenly asked. "Who said Adam was a Christian thing? Who said Adam was created by Jehovah, that Birdman?" Alexander the Great immediately said with dissatisfaction, "In fact, the legend of Adam had been widely spread in the world long before that liar Jesus was born. According to the legends of my time, Adam and Eve were the first 2 humans in the world. The rest of the humans were born from Eve's belly. I heard that Eve could give birth to 18,000 people at once. Every time their children reached the age of 12, Adam and Eve would move to another place to continue living, giving birth to a new batch of children, and when they reached the age of 12, they would leave again. This process repeated again and again. After Adam and Eve gave birth to the 108th batch of children, Eve consumed all of her vitality and died on the earth. Her body finally turned into the Garden of Eden. Adam, on the other hand, found a world that was sealed by ice and snow 365 days a year by himself. He used the hard ice to freeze himself forever, and from then on, no one could find a trace of him. When Adam and Eve gave birth to 108 tribes of humans in 108 different places, they gradually developed into 108 different races and started endless wars. The final mission of the Macedonian people was to unify the 108 different races and merge the bloodline of humans into one. From Alexander the Great's mouth, Adam and Eve had completely different stories. P.S. In reality, Adam and Eve were not created by Christianity. Instead, they were created by Christianity after absorbing some local legends from Europe. However, there were many versions of the story of Adam and Eve. The version that Alexander the Great mentioned was a version that humans copied from some leftover document. As for the version of the story of Adam and Eve that Alexander the Great knew, only God knew. Also, according to the settings, Adam's body should be installed in the number 1 robot, and the one in the number 0 robot was only a clone of Adam. But considering the needs of the plot, let's not argue with the author about this. Is this why humans found Adam's body in the South Pole after the completion of the plan? Ling Boli thought thoughtfully. But soon, in Ling Boli's world, Adam and Eve were sealed in ice together. It was not like what Alexander the Great said, where Eve's body finally turned into the Garden of Eden. From this point, it seemed that Alexander the Great's version was wrong again. Are you planning to use Adam to break through the defense of Yuzhong City? Alexander the Great was not a fool. Otherwise, he would not have asked his troops to retreat. So when he saw Adam break through the defense of the number 0 robot and show his real body, Alexander the Great understood Ling Boli's intention. Yes. Ling Boli nodded. What a great idea! Alexander the Great began to praise. Adam is the ancestor of all humans, and he is the most perfect human body. Even if the ring of truth shines on his head, it will not affect Adam's ability at all. Because all of Adam's abilities are powers that humans should have, it is naturally impossible to be restrained by the ring of truth. So, it is equivalent to having a real universe-level combat power. No. Ling Boli shook her head. This is a flood level. Flood level. Alexander the Great's expression was as if he had eaten **T. Are you kidding me? This is a flood level. Of course it is a flood level. Even unlocking his seal will take half an hour. Ling Boli said faintly. This also explained why Ling Boli did not put Adam into the battlefield the moment the Ring of Truth appeared. Then let us quietly watch the power of this flood-level master. Alexander the Great said with anticipation. I'm afraid we're in trouble now. Gu Xianyuan immediately noticed the abnormality of the number 0 robot. At this time, only Misaka Mikoto was by her side. Yang Jian and Sword Immortal Ling Su were sent by Gu Xianyuan to the other city walls to command the battle. Only Misaka Mikoto, whose combat power was completely sealed due to the appearance of the Ring of Truth, stayed by Gu Xuanyuan's side. In fact, Misaka Mikoto also wanted to join the battle, but she was forced to stay by Gu Xianyuan. Misaka Mikoto, who had lost her electromagnetic abilities, was even weaker than an ordinary person. She would only be sending herself to death if she joined the battle. Of course, Gu Xianyuan would not do that. I once heard from the mayor of our free city that there is an even more powerful force hidden inside the armor of the New Age Gospel Warriors. The outer layer of armor of the New Age Gospel Warriors looks like it is used to defend against attacks, but it is actually a shackle to trap that force. Once that force breaks through the shackle, I'm afraid that even I won't be able to defeat it. If even you can't defeat it, then doesn't that mean that this force has already surpassed the Ian rank? Gu Xuanyuan's brows furrowed even more. At this time, Adam's body began to move. Adam's movements were very strange. He was not like a normal person who would either walk or run. Adam looked more like a patient who could not coordinate his limbs. His body was twisted into a strange Z shape as he walked unsteadily toward the city walls of Yuzhong City. This was a very unscientific posture. The center of gravity of the body was far away from the leg. A normal person who had just assumed this posture would have lost their center of gravity and fallen to the ground. However, Adam walked forward in this extremely unscientific posture at an extremely fast speed. By the time everyone realized what was going on, Adam had already appeared outside the city walls of Yuzhong City. The city walls of Yuzhong City were very tall. Otherwise, those Yuan Ko would not have taken more than 10 minutes to climb up to the top. However, Adam's body was even taller. The height of Yuzhong City's city walls was just below his crotch. Those who were closest to Adam could even see Adam's reproductive device, which was the size of a bus. Open fire! Zhao Qinfeng's order quickly rang in these people's ears. One by one, they raised the guns in their hands and poured countless bullets onto Adam's body. However, it was unknown what material Adam's skin was made of, but it was unable to enter Adam's body at all. In fact, it couldn't even scratch his skin. Everyone immediately became frightened. This was the first Yuan Ko that could not be harmed by guns. Retreat! Let everyone retreat! Zhao Qinfeng was about to order his men to continue attacking, but Gu Xuanyuan's order to retreat rang in his ears. Miss Xianyuan, let us try again. We can still try again. Zhao Qinfeng said sincerely. No need. I want you to order them to retreat immediately. Please note, this is an order, not a discussion with you. Gu Xianyuan said sternly. All right. Zhao Qinfeng had no choice but to order the people around Adam to retreat. However, because of Zhao Qinfeng's rebuttal, this order was issued a little too late. When the people near the city walls began to retreat, the huge Adam suddenly raised his hands high up, then pressed his arms together tightly, and hammered heavily on the city walls from bottom to top. The entire city walls instantly trembled. When the dust that filled the sky dissipated, the people were horrified to find that a section of the city wall that was more than 100 meters long had completely collapsed from just one hammering from Adam. All that was left was a ground of ruins and the corpses of hundreds of people who could not escape in time. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.